What happens when an empire's most dangerous prince breaks into a grand ducal manor just to kidnap a chained child? Let's just say the corrupt nobles are about to pay for every single thing they did. Bound in heavy iron shackles inside a dimly lit room, young Rashette sits calmly by the window, humming a quiet melody under the moonlight. Her subtle tune fades as her eyes shift toward the dark night outside. She whispers softly, sensing the grand arrival of her savior at last. Suddenly, gossip column blast shatters the estate's front entrance, blasting heavy debris into the air. The Duke of Eldon freaks out as dust settles. His panic peaks when a guard screams that an intruder has obliterated the main gate. Seriously, did he expect a politely written polite letter from an unstoppable warlord instead? Stepping through the rising smoke with a glowing sword, Crown Prince Lucius enters with an eerie calm, casually apologizing for his uninvited late-night arrival. Terrified guards back away in utter horror, trembling as they recognize the feared Prince of Calamity standing right inside their courtyard. Duke Eldon tries to play the authority card, shouting at the top of his lungs to demand how an imperial royal dares breach his noble house. Lucius cuts him off with cold disdain, unleashing a surging aura of dark magic as he declares he's only here to reclaim his true family. The Duke stammers in utter confusion, completely baffled by the prince's mention of family. Bro really thought he was untouchable. Lucius looks down at the terrified Duke with piercing purple eyes, questioning if the old man is truly that dense. Above the courtyard balcony, locked in chains, floating or waiting, Rashette sits quietly as Lucius demands her immediate return. The Duke furiously points a finger, lying through his teeth, by claiming Rashette was always their rightful daughter and calling Lucius a kidnapper. Ignoring the Duke's desperate babbling, Lucius remembers a vivid memory of young Rashette smiling brightly down at him from the grand balcony above. Without an ounce of fear, the girl leaps straight off the high ledge into open air toward his waiting arms. Lucius dashes forward at full speed, opening his arms wide to catch her. He catches her securely mid-air, wrapping his heavy cloak around her tiny frame. Rashette wraps her arms around his neck, giggling softly as she teasingly scolds him for taking so long. Talk about a dramatic rescue. Holding her close with a gentle gaze, Lucius vows to help Princess Rashette reclaim her stolen identity and expose the truth. Flashback time. The Duchy of Eldon is a legendary lineage of mages where exclusive white magic passes strictly to the firstborn child of every generation. And in this current era, the revered firstborn of the ducal family was none other than young Lady Rashette herself. Cheerful and bright, little Rashette grew up clutching heavy books, full of immense promise and innocence. By age 9, she had already devoured complex academic texts that adult scholars could barely comprehend. She routinely out-argued her own high-ranking mage Tutor at the chalkboard, leaving the poor guy holding his head in complete academic defeat. Look at his stressed facial expression. She completely wrecked his career. Hailed as the favored child of the ducal house, everyone assumed she was destined for absolute glory. That is, until her mother's harsh voice suddenly interrupted her walk down the hallway. Her mother scolds her sternly for walking unseemly, holding her favored second daughter Serena closely while telling Rashette to act more refined like her sister. Little Rashette bowed her head, quietly apologizing whispers to keep the peace. But her mother's cold, resentful side-eye revealed a deep-seated hatred that went way beyond mere discipline. Rashette tried to remain optimistic, believing her father would surely praise her stellar academic achievements instead. Sitting behind his massive desk, Duke Eldon glares down at her coldly, asking why her innate magic still hasn't manifested. The tutor stammers nervously, confirming that despite her brilliance, no magic circle has appeared yet. The Duke slams his fists on the desk in a rage, screaming that scholarly intellect is utterly useless without magic. He bellows about their noble lineage as descendants of the great founder Rashuvia, blooming furiously, refusing to accept a magicless failure. Ah, yes, classic trash manhwa parenting at its finest. He tells her she'd be far more useful as a pretty bargaining chip if she had charm instead of useless books. As Rashette watches him rant, she knows mages usually awaken between ages 5 and 8, though founder Rashumia reportedly awakened at 10. Suddenly, the door bursts open as little Serena comes running into the office yelling for her daddy. The Duke's cold, angry face instantly turns into a gross, overly affectionate smile. He scoops Serena into his lap with head pats, showering her with love while completely ignoring Rashette. Turning to Rashette with disgust, he coldly asks why she's still lingering in his sight. He brusquely dismisses her to go finish her assignments while giving all his warmth to her sister. Ugh. Walking back through the hallway, the tutor tries to cheer her up by reminding her that the great Rishumia also awakened late at age 10. The tutor explains standard magical theory regarding historical awakening timelines. Rashette casually points out that historical records are wrong and Rishumia actually awakened at 5, prompting the tutor to suspiciously ask where she learned that obscure fact. Realizing her slip-up, Rashette panics, sweating nervously as she fabricates a clumsy excuse about reading it in a picture book. She quickly bids him farewell and dashes into her room before he can probe any further. Leaning against the closed door, she sighs in relief, knowing she almost exposed her massive secret. The truth behind Ancestor Rishumia's legendary awakening was heavily altered by history books over time. The original Rishumia was an orphan whose early life was totally unknown to the public eye. So how could a 9-year-old child know the secret history of the Empire's greatest mage? Simple, because Rashette is actually the reincarnated soul of the Grand Ancestor Rishumia Eldon herself. Talk about the ultimate power flex. Recalling the overwhelming flood of past life memories knocked Rashette flat on her back, leaving her bedridden with a raging fever for 3 full days. In her original lifetime as Rishumia, she had started out as an impoverished orphan wandering the dusty town square in dirty, torn rags. Watching wealthy families stroll by, the starving little girl could only clutch her aching stomach, desperately wishing for a single warm meal. She watched helplessly as local mothers guided their happy children home with baskets filled with fresh apples. Feeling completely invisible to the world around her. Eventually, Rishumia mastered magic, climbing to the absolute peak of power to claim unimaginable wealth and glory. Sarcastic. Talk about the ultimate rags to riches glow-up. So when she reincarnated into the Grand Ducal House of Eldon, having a loving home with noble parents felt like an absolute miracle. Little Rashette would run down the polished corridors with open arms, calling out happily whenever she spotted her new mother and father. She truly believed this second life was her long-awaited chance to experience genuine, unconditional parental love. Reborn directly into the famous Eldon bloodline, Rashette retained every single intricate magic circle and system she had created in her previous life. Eager to earn their affection, she spent her days devouring heavy magical treatises and eagerly showing off her intense scholarly progress to her father. But look at his uncomfortable face. He's acting like a child presenting homework as a biohazard. She tried reaching out to her mother as well, attempting to share her joy while her mother held the newly born second daughter, Serena. Yet no matter how hard she tried, her parents only responded with icy stares and unsettled silences. Rashette slowly clenched her little fist, realizing with a heavy heart that her entire approach had been fundamentally flawed from the start. Outsmarting grown adults and fixing their mistakes didn't make a child beloved. It made him seem creepy and unnatural. She expected cozy family bonding, but accidentally speed ran, making her parents feel academically inferior. Watching Duke Eldon cradle little Serena with gentle tenderness, Rashette couldn't help but sigh with deep envy. She reassured herself that they didn't truly hate her, holding on to hope because they were throwing her grand 10th birthday celebration the very next day. Besides, her vast knowledge would finally shine the moment her hereditary white magic officially awakened. She walked towards the brightly lit party hall, convincing herself that once her innate magic manifested, her parents would finally accept her with pride. But right in the middle of the birthday banquet, an unexpected surge of blinding light suddenly erupted across the room. Duke Eldon and his wife gasped in utter shock, suddenly cheering with ecstatic joy as they locked eyes on their younger child. Little Serena floated gracefully in a sparkling aura of pure white magic right before the gathered nobility. Whispers instantly rippled through the noble guests, wondering how second-born Serena could possibly manifest the unique white magic reserved strictly for the family's firstborn. Wait a minute, the math isn't mathing here at all. Rashette stood frozen in utter shock, trembling, her mind racing as the terrible truth began to dawn on her. Shadowy eyes seemed to glare at her from every corner of the dark hall as a terrifying question echoed in her head. Who was she, really? Since Eldon white magic passed exclusively to the absolute firstborn child, Serena's awakening proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that Rashette wasn't the real firstborn. Cold sweat dripped down her pale face as her parents turned toward her with eyes devoid of any lingering warmth. Richette clutched her dress in desperate denial, begging herself to believe there had to be some kind of terrible mistake. Her mother smirked down at her with pure spite, coldly declaring that Richette must have been switched at birth. Wow, look at that instant shift in maternal instinct. She couldn't wait 5 seconds to disown her. Pulling little Serena into a tight, protective embrace, the Duchess convinced herself that this was the only logical explanation. She shouted aloud for everyone to hear, claiming that this magicless child standing before them had never been her true daughter from the very beginning. Her voice twisted with bitter spite as she fabricated a story that her real baby had died at birth and deceitful servants had swapped in a random orphan. Desperate for help, Richette reached out toward her father, calling out to him with tears welling in her eyes. But Duke Eldon glared down at her with terrifying disgust, treating his own raised daughter like toxic garbage. She spun around to look at her mage tutor, crying, hoping the old scholar who knew her brilliant mind would step in to defend her honor. The tutor sweated nervously, keeping his mouth tightly shut, as he recalled all the time she had effortlessly outsmarted him in front of the Duke. Sensing the dangerous shift in power, the cowardly tutor looked away, completely abandoning her to preserve his own status. What an absolute spineless coward! Heavy, measured footsteps suddenly echoed through the grand hall as a dark silhouette stepped out from the noble crowd. It was none other than the ruthless head of House Eldon himself, Gustav Eldon, Richette's stern grandfather. Gustav Eldon. Without showing an ounce of emotion, the ruthless patriarch coldly declared that the birthday party was officially canceled. Pointing a harsh finger directly at the trembling child, he commanded his elite guards to immediately restrain the disgraced girl. Later that night, heavy horse hooves trudged through a dark, freezing forest covered in thick white snow. The guards carelessly dumped little Richette onto the frozen ground in coarse rags, tossing a small tied bundle beside her. The mounted guards sneered down at her, calling her a worthless fugitive and mocking that she wouldn't survive the brutal freezing night anyway. Hearing distant beast howls echo through the dark trees, the guards quickly turned their horses around to retreat to safety. They galloped off into the darkness, leaving a helpless 9-year-old child entirely alone in the pitch-black blizzard. Richette opened her glowing green eyes in the snow, instantly seeing straight through their malicious scheme. They really thought tossing out a legendary archmage's soul would end smoothly. They wanted to frame her exile as a voluntary runaway, so the public wouldn't question the sudden disappearance of a magicless princess. Shivering violently from the biting frost, she forced her small body up and picked up the dry loaf of bread. She recognized this dangerous place instantly. Gasp! It was the infamous Black Forest, a domain crawling with vicious magical beasts. Her eyes widened in sheer horror as she realized the guards' final cruelty. The food bundle they threw wasn't meant to feed her, but to act as fresh bait for hunting beasts. Raw, blood-soaked meat lay dripping on the pristine white snow, giving off a sharp metallic reek. Richette immediately realized the guards hadn't tossed her a meal at all. They deliberately gave her raw flesh so hungry magical beasts would hunt her down by scent. Her tiny body trembled violently in the freezing snow as blood dripped down her face, panting, gasping out ragged breaths. She wept softly, wondering why she had to suffer like this when she had spent her whole life studying tirelessly just to earn a tiny scrap of parental affection. She remembered running up to her mother with an open magic tome, practically glowing with childhood enthusiasm. But look at the Duchess's utterly disgusted expression. She was reacting like a toddler handing her dirty mud pies. The Duchess's lips twisted into a cold, spiteful sneer as she declared that Richette had been swapped at birth. Talk about the ultimate villain move, making up a wild lie just to throw away your own child. Tears streamed uncontrollably down young Richette's bruised cheeks as she sobbed into the snow, crying, her heart breaking because she truly was their biological blood daughter all along. Her bare feet slipped on the slick ice, sending her tumbling hard face first onto the frozen ground. She winced in pain, groaning softly as the biting frost consumed her small body. Shuffling her bare feet through the deep drifts, she spotted shadowy beast eyes glowing ominous purple through the dark trees. Wow, look at that beast design. The artist really went all out making those monster silhouettes look terrifying. But she pictured her ancient past self as the magnificent archmage Rishumia, capable of summoning apocalyptic magic circles to obliterate whole armies. But without mana in this tiny 9-year-old body, every single grand spell in her mind was completely useless, leaving her weeping in frustration. In her previous lifetime, high-tier magic was the only thing she truly possessed. Yet, despite having ancient grand magic in her soul, she had foolishly believed that blood family ties would guarantee genuine love in this second life. Loose rocks gave way under her bare feet, sending her sliding roughly down a jagged frozen slope into the dark ravine below. She lay curled up in a tiny ball against the massive snowdrifts, looking utterly microscopic under the towering black forest trees. A massive shadow crept out from the dense thicket as a demonic purple wolf let out a guttural growl. Whispers. Of course, a wild wolf appears right when our main character is at 0 health. Classic manhwa drama timing. Exhaustion and hypothermia finally took over, knocking Rochette completely unconscious onto the icy floor. The purple wolf lurked just inches away, lowering its head to inspect the motionless child. Suddenly, crisp leather boots crunched softly through the snow as a tall figure wrapped in an elegant dark velvet cloak stepped directly between the beast and the child. Without showing a single trace of fear, the handsome silver-haired noble knelt down in the blizzard and gently lifted the tiny girl into his arms. He carefully brushed frozen yellow hair away from her bruised, tear-stained face, examining her small wounds with deep concern. His striking purple eyes gazed down solemnly at her pale face as snow flurries swirled across his magnificent silver hair. Rochette slowly opened her glowing green eyes, hearing the gentle snap of a warm, crackling fireplace instead of howling blizzard winds. She nestled under the silky fabric, whispers, realizing she was swaddled in intense, cozy heat. Suddenly snapping awake, her cheeks turned bright red as she realized she was burning alive. Sitting up in sheer confusion, she looked around a massive luxury bedroom, only to find herself buried under a literal mountain of thick duvets. Seriously? He piled so many heavy blankets on her, she was basically suffocating. She touched the white medical bandage wrapped neatly around her head, murmuring softly to check if she was actually still alive. A silver-haired young man wearing a relaxed open-collar tunic stepped into the room carrying a bowl of hot soup. Seeing her awake, his face melted into an amazingly warm, angelic smile as he sighed with immense relief. Rochette pointed nervously at the massive pile of heavy quilts. He chuckled softly, explaining that her body was so icy cold when he found her that he panicked and wrapped her in every single blanket he could find. She gave him an exasperated, deadpan glare from under her headband, muttering about the absurd weight while he enthusiastically offered her a spoonful of soup. Talk about aggressive caretaking. This guy treats hypothermia like an Olympic sport. Observing his gentle demeanor, Rochette reasoned that he couldn't possibly be an assassin sent by House Eldon, especially since he had already saved her life. He carefully blew on the hot broth before gently feeding her a spoonful right in bed. She swallowed the warm food, amazed, her eyes sparkling as she admitted out loud how delicious it tasted. Hearing her compliment, he beamed with pure happiness, his golden smile practically lighting up the entire room. Top panel shows him sharing a comical chibi moment, but right in the middle of eating, Rochette suddenly remembered her situation, clutching her blanket and shouting out for his real identity. She almost got completely distracted by a single bowl of good soup. She knew the dangerous Black Forest was strictly private territory owned by Duke Eldon, meaning normal civilians were forbidden from entering. The young man turned toward her politely, asking if he should introduce himself properly. Placing a hand over his chest with refined, noble grace, he smoothly declared his name as Lucius Arcadia. Rochette froze completely, staring back at him with blank dot eyes as her brain struggled to process the famous name. She repeated the name out loud, asking if he meant the high-ranking royal name. She squinted suspiciously, asking if he shared the name with the crown prince by sheer coincidence. He chuckled with a playful wink, casually revealing that he was actually the real deal. Rochette screamed in pure shock, her jaw practically hitting the floor as her eyes bulged out. Flashback memory panels surged through her mind. Lucius Arcadia was legendary as the ruthless supreme commander who slaughtered hordes of demonic beasts, leaving literal mountains of corpses in his wake. A blood-red aura shadowed his terrifying portrait, reminding the realm why everyone called him the bloodthirsty Calamity Crown Prince. She blinked twice, looking back at the cheerful guy sitting next to her, literally radiating soft flowers, hearts, and fluffy kittens. Wow, look at that absurd contrast. The terrifying Calamity Prince looks like a gentle house cat in real life. Rachette pulled her blanket up with a hilariously disgusted, unimpressed scowl, instantly deciding that those Imperial rumors were absolute garbage. Lucius tilted his head with a sweet smile, turning the interrogation around by asking about her background instead. He pointed out logically that a tiny young child shouldn't be wandering deep inside the heavily guarded Elden territory. Flashbacks of her brutal exile flashed across her vision, from being disowned in a grand dress to freezing near raw meat in the snow whispers. Seeing her uncomfortable silence, Lucius leaned forward slightly with soft, compassionate eyes. He lowered his voice, gently asking if she could tell him her real name. Rachette stares at Lucius, her mind racing as she realizes that if this guy finds out her true identity, he'll immediately drag her back to the ducal estate. Dark, suffocating memories of her cold-hearted parents flash across her vision, reminding her that she no longer has a place to call home. Lucius sits comfortably on a stool holding a warm bowl of soup, tilting his head with a gentle, non-threatening smile as he checks on her. She hesitates for a second, lowering her head as she tries to come up with a clever cover story to hide her noble bloodline. She looks him straight in the eye and introduces herself as Retchie, hoping a simple nickname will keep her safe from being returned to House Elden. Nice try, kid, but hiding your identity in a fantasy manhwa usually lasts about 2 panels. She quickly adds that Richie is just a cute nickname for Rachette, even though no one in her entire life has ever actually called her that before. Lucius gives her a soft, knowing smirk, looking completely unbothered while his striking purple eyes study her expressions. Looking out toward the dark, snow-covered windows, Lucius explains that the Black Forest is far too dangerous, meaning he can't just abandon a helpless child out here. He points a single finger upward, noting that since she can miraculously still walk, they ought to head out together once she's rested. Rachette's heart thumps violently in her chest as she senses something terribly wrong with his tone. Lucius casually drops the bombshell that he plans on escorting her right back to the ducal house, leaving her completely stunned. She gasps out in confusion, panicked, asking how on earth he managed to figure out who she was so quickly. Come on, Rachette, you're literally glowing with golden hair and emerald eyes. You're not exactly subtle. Lucius smoothly breaks down his brilliant deductions, pointing out her silky golden hair, pristine green eyes, soft unworked hands, and the sheer impossibility of any normal commoner kid surviving deep inside the Black Forest. He gently assumes her family must be worried sick about her. It's cough, but Rachette coldly cuts him off, stating flatly that her parents don't care about her at all. Tears burst from her glowing eyes as the unbearable emotional pain comes rushing back, crushing her small heart into pieces. Deep down, she wishes she could still dream of a loving family welcoming her home with open arms, but every single drop of hope has been completely destroyed. Lucius gets utterly flustered as she breaks down sobbing uncontrollably. Look at the legendary Calamity Prince panicking over a crying child. He can fight giant magic beasts, but tears are his ultimate weakness. Standing near the icy glass window, Lucius stares silently out at the howling blizzard, realizing this small girl's situation is far darker than he thought. He glances back at her small sleeping silhouette nestled under the heavy quilts, confirming without a shadow of a doubt that she is indeed the young lady of House Elden. Flashback visions depict the prestige of House Elden, where the firstborn child is revered above all else, making her sudden abandonment deep inside the monster-infested forest totally incomprehensible. Suddenly, a sharp knock at the door breaks his quiet train of thought, prompting Lucius to turn around and check who's outside. His loyal knight aide steps inside to report on tomorrow's monster subjugation schedule. Low, more dramatic. While down in the dark thickets, vicious purple wolves with glowing eyes continue to terrorize local villages. Lucius listens intently with a grave look on his face, knowing that handling the surge of magical beasts is his royal duty. The brown-haired aide enthusiastically begs to join the raid, practically bouncing on his feet as he asks if the Crown Prince will allow him to tag along. He places a hand on his chest, enthusiastically promising that he won't get in the way and will happily carry all the heavy luggage just to watch the legendary prince in combat. Lucius approves the request with a quiet sigh, planning to set off at dawn before suddenly reconsidering his schedule. Looking back at that cozy fireplace room, he decides they should take their sweet time enjoying a hot, hearty breakfast before heading out into the cold snow. Morning sunlight bathes the magnificent snow-covered mansion, illuminating a breakfast table filled with fresh baked bread, hot vegetable soup, and warm tea. Rachette munches happily on a warm loaf of bread with crumbs stuck to her cheek, amazed. Double-check it if the Crown Prince is really going on a monster hunt in person. Look at her eating like a little chipmunk. Food really is the ultimate comfort after a life-or-death crisis. Lucius chuckles softly, reaching across the table to gently wipe the stray breadcrumb right off her rosy cheek. Rachette freezes in absolute horror as her brain snaps awake, panicked, realizing she just spoke to the high and mighty Crown Prince without using proper noble honorifics. She flushes bright red, bowing her head in a hilariously dramatic fashion, while desperately begging for his royal forgiveness. Trying to regain her composure, she politely explains that managing the Black Forest is strictly House Elden's domain, recalling how their white magic was traditionally used to suppress the dangerous monster miasma. She clutches her bread tightly, remembering her father's cold, demanding face as he constantly berated her for failing to awaken her magical powers. Ah, yes, the classic terrible manoir dad who treats his child like a broken magic battery. Lucius smiles warmly and gives her head a gentle, soothing pat, complimenting her sharp mind while naively assuming her parents must still care. Standing up from his chair, he kindly informs her that taking a small child on a dangerous monster subjugation is out of the question, opting to send her home with a royal escort instead. Rachette drops her head into deep shadow, her tiny body trembling as dark panic consumes her thoughts. Unable to keep up the facade any longer, she quietly confesses that she possesses absolutely zero magic power inside her body. Lucius stops dead in his tracks, turning his head back in pure shock as her heartbreaking words ring through the room. She lowers her eyes, admitting that her total lack of magic was the exact reason her ruthless family threw her into the Black Forest to die. A terrifying visual flashback depicts a pool of blood on the cold stone floor, as Rachette realizes that returning to House Elden means guaranteed execution. She puts on a painfully bright, heartbreaking smile while tears glass over her eyes, crying, softly apologizing for being such a troublesome burden. Lucius stands frozen in complete silence, his purple eyes widening in horror as the terrifying truth of her family's cruelty sets in. Rachette steps off her high chair onto the cold wooden floor with her bare feet, determined to fight for her own survival. Bowing her head deeply in a humble gesture, she begs the Crown Prince to let her accompany him on the trip, whispering out loud that she just wants a chance to live. Lucius gazes back at the tiny, determined child, heart aching with profound sympathy for everything she suffered. Scene shifts outdoors to the snow-covered forest, where Lucius is personally pulling a wooden sled through deep snowdrifts with Rachette wrapped cozy in thick furs. Wait, check out this ridiculous visual. The feared Calamity Prince is literally acting as a human sled horse for a 9-year-old girl. His knight aide walks alongside them in complete disbelief, sweat dropping as he stammers out a question about who this mystery young lady is. The aide flips out in total panic, screaming that bringing a fragile child on an active beast hunt is absolute madness. He frantically argues that pulling a child's sled is far beneath royal dignity, but Lucius casually strides forward without giving a single care in the world. Lucius flashes a surprisingly cold, closed-eye smile, casually reminding his complaining knights that they're plenty of dead weight themselves. Ouch. Imagine your royal boss roasting you to your face after you tried to talk down to a literal child. Sitting snug inside the wooden sled, Rachette looks up at the white-haired royal and softly calls out his name. Lucius pauses his stride, tilting his head back to acknowledge her with a quiet hum. Rachette glances back at the entourage, asking if those retainers aren't being completely rude by constantly whining. Lucius admits with a light shrug that usually nobody dares follow him out into the deep woods, but today they stubbornly insisted on tagging along. Rachette's jaw drops in utter disbelief as she realizes he normally hunts monstrous creatures completely by himself. Wait, so this kid-looking crown prince is out here soloing high-level raid bosses like it's a Sunday stroll? She clutches her dress tightly while staring at his back, completely bewildered by the sheer madness of his casual routine. Fine print notes inside her head panic over the fact that a literal crown prince is living like a lone wolf mercenary. A mysterious dark shadow hangs over Lucius as he trudges forward through the snowfall, carrying the heavy sled rope across his shoulder. Narrative text highlights that this solitary fighter is none other than Crown Prince Lucius Arcadia. A quick memory flashes through Rachette's mind of her days back in the Imperial Library, recalling how she once asked her tutor why people call Lucius the Calamity. The scholar's sweat dropped nervously, stammering while trying to dodge the sensitive topic. Flashes of a gruesome scene show a young Lucius standing blankly amid pools of blood, as the tutor explained that an unexplainable epidemic wiped out several royal family members the exact year Lucius's magic first manifested. Rachette questioned if that wasn't just a bitter coincidence, but the scholar revealed that as a concubine's child, his very presence felt like a terrible curse to the Empress. On top of that, the true nature of his magic was far darker than anyone dared admit. Back in the snowy present, Rachette lowers her eyes in quiet contemplation, her green gaze darkening as the pieces of his tragic past start coming together. Symbolic dark flowers framed the contrasting silhouettes of the two remaining imperial princes, Lucius, the crown prince, and his much younger half-brother, the fourth prince. Flashback imagery depicts the Empress seated gracefully on a lavish sofa, doting affectionately on her biological son while he reads a colorful book. Rachette stares intently at Lucius's back, realizing how drastically different his upbringing was compared to the Empress's favorite child. She watches snow fall around his shoulders, reasoning that sending a crown prince out to hunt deadly beasts without proper backup makes zero logical sense. Let's be real. Sending the heir to the throne on solo suicide missions isn't standard royal protocol. That's straight-up subtle assassination. Memories of her own abandoned, freezing body overlay the cold landscape as she gently asks if it doesn't bother him that his own family clearly wants him dead. Lucius stops cold in his tracks, his striking purple eyes gazing back at her in silence. Rather than expressing anger, Lucius offers a soft, genuine smile, quietly replying that he's just glad he can still be useful to his family. Rachette stares back at him with wide, stunned eyes, completely shaken by his selflessness. Sunlight breaks through the snowy pine canopy as Rachette reflects on his heartbreaking words. Though their backgrounds are worlds apart, that deep, desperate longing to be useful to one's own family hits her right in the heart. Warm, golden light bathes Rachette's face as a gentle warmth fills her chest, feeling a profound emotional connection to the lone prince for the very first time. She suddenly throws her arms up into the air with exaggerated cheer, loudly praising him for already doing such incredible, brave things. Fine print captions tease her self-deprecating side as she mutters how, unlike him, she managed to accomplish absolutely nothing. Her bright smile fades slightly into a gentle, bittersweet expression as she gazes down at her lap, softly murmuring how nice it must feel to actually contribute. Watching the sled tracks cut through the fresh snow, she whispers her quiet wish that she could have been useful to someone too. Bro, my heart is breaking for this sweet little girl. She's only 9 and already thinks she has to prove her worth just to exist. The heavy snowy pines loom overhead as Lucius scans the dense thicket, sensing that the monster nest is directly up ahead. Lucius smoothly draws his long silver blade, sternly instructing the retainers and Rachette to stay back and wait where it's safe. Standing tall against the winter wind, his white hair flutters softly as his sharp purple eyes lock onto the shadows between the trees. Suddenly, huge, terrifying purple wolves with glowing violet eyes burst out from the dark bushes with a menacing snarl. Groan. Lucius internally remarks that bringing people along on a mission is something he genuinely dislikes. Leaping high into the air with incredible grace, Lucius turns his sword mid-flight, aiming straight for the ferocious beasts. He reflects that his dislike for companions isn't because he prefers working alone. With a brutal, fluid motion, his blade slashes through the monsters, spraying blood across the pristine white snow. Behind him, the cowardly knight retainers recoil in sheer horror. Blood spatters across the scene while Rachette watches silently from the wooden sled, completely unbothered by the sudden violence. Lucius notes that it's not even because he minds hauling around dead weight. Standing victorious over a pile of slain magical beasts, Lucius glances back into the shadows. He reflects that whenever the slaughter is over, the eyes of those who accompanied him are always filled with terror, disgust. Red droplets frame Rachette's wide green eyes as she peers over the edge of the sled. Lucius sighs inwardly, knowing all too well how people look at him after seeing his brutal fighting style. Surrounded by dead monsters in the quiet, blood-stained forest, the white-haired prince stands entirely alone, expecting the usual horrified reactions from his followers. A wide aerial view shows the dramatic distance between Lucius and the sled, underscoring his deep isolation. But instead of fear, Richette's face lights up with sheer, unadulterated awe as golden sparkles practically radiate from her eyes. Look at her looking at him like he's a shimmering anime hero. Lucius was expecting terror, but he got a diehard fan. Without a single hint of hesitation, Chibi Richette leaps straight out of the high sled and scurries right through the snowdrifts right up to the blood-stained prince. Lucius turns around in surprise, telling her to duck down because stray monster blood has splattered across her face. Ignoring his warning entirely, Richette pulls out a clean white handkerchief, standing on tiptoes to gently dab the red blood stains off Lucius's cheek. Lucius freezes completely, his purple eyes wide with total bewilderment as a faint blush creeps across his stunned face. The legendary Calamity Prince who slays giant magical beasts just got completely paralyzed by a tiny girl wiping his face. Richette beams up at him with the brightest sweet smile surrounded by blooming yellow flowers, holding up the now soiled cloth with pride. Nearby, under the pine trees, one of the night aides awkwardly steps forward to offer Lucius a leather water flask so he can catch his breath. Lucius uncaps the flask and takes a calm swig, asking his aide if that was the entire horde of monsters. Lowering the flask, he casually tells Richette that clearing out that main nest means the surrounding villages will finally be safe from beast attacks for a good long while. Behind her back, the two cowardly retainers begin frantically whispering to each other, gasp, sweating profusely while eyeing the dead wolves in terror. Suddenly, the temperature plummets as a suffocating dark aura surges through the forest. Richette twitches her head back in alarm, sensing something worse approaching. Lucius drops his stance instantly, lunging down toward Richette in total shock, as towering purple shadows engulf the clearing. A horrifying three-headed giant purple magic serpent erupts from the snow, bearing massive venomous fangs and roaring with terrifying malice. The night retainers scream in absolute panic, fleeing for their lives as the colossal monster looms right over them. Sarcastic. Wow, super brave knights you brought along, Lucius. They literally ran away faster than a speedrunner. The monstrous serpent's central head snaps downward at lightning speed, diving straight toward the defenseless little girl. In a split second, Lucius lunges across the snow, sweeping Richette tightly into his arms to shield her body. Simultaneously, flashback text quotes her old tutor, revealing the deep, dark secret of Lucius's true magical affinity. "Close your eyes," Lucius roars frantically, thrusting his bare hand forward as pitch-black dark flames explode outward from his palm. The narrative reveals that his true element is black magic. A massive, blinding pillar of pure black magic surges skyward, completely vaporizing the giant serpent in a terrifying display of catastrophic power. Narrative text reveals that Lucius's pitch-black aura is identical to the corrupting energy of the Black Forest itself, a dangerous, forbidden color that no human was ever meant to possess. In stark contrast, the imperial royal family traditionally inherits a sacred blue magic associated with purity and healing, making Lucius's destructive dark power its ultimate polar opposite. This horrific contrast is precisely why the imperial court branded Prince Lucius as the Calamity. Standing amidst the swirling dark miasma, pulls Richette closely into his arms. Lucius pants heavily, his face pale as he checks over the little girl, nervously apologizing for scaring her with his violent display. But instead of being terrified of his dark magic, Richette steps back with a scowl, yelling that his terrifying aura isn't the real issue here. Bro, she just survived a giant snake attack and her first instinct is to lecture the crown prince on proper mana etiquette? Her green eyes blaze with intensity as she demands to know if anyone ever bothered to teach him how to properly control his absurdly high magic. Lucius blinks in utter confusion, completely thrown off by her unexpected lecture. In a total frenzy, Chibi Richette grabs him by the collar, shouting that he was just mindlessly blasting black magic everywhere without any fine control. Who on earth was your teacher? Did they even cover basic magic theory or discharge mechanics? Flashback imagery explains that centuries ago, mages who lack mana control caused chaotic magical explosions, leading to widespread death and brutal persecution, until proper control methods were developed. Rishumia's ancient academy spent decades perfecting magical control circles so that mages could cast powerful spells safely without collateral damage. Richette continues berating him, pointing out that having an insane mana pool without basic control is a literal ticking time bomb waiting to go off. Her little hands squeeze his coat trimmed tight as she mutters how completely unforgivable it is that his royal tutors left him so utterly untrained. Completely shell-shocked by the tiny girl's relentless scolding, a dizzy Chibi Lucius stammers out her nickname while fake blood hilariously leaks from his nose. Look at him. This guy solos Calamity beasts, but a 9-year-old scolding him gives him emotional damage. Realizing she just grabbed and screamed at the crown prince of an entire empire, Rashette panics, frantically waving her hands while asking if he's okay. But as she checks on him, her smile instantly freezes as a strange twitch catches her attention. Violent purple flames surge out from Lucius's body as he collapses to his knees, coughing up dark blood. "Get away!" he chokes out. Panic strikes Rashette's heart as she realizes the terrifying truth. The mana inside his body is undergoing a full-blown mana rampage, resonating directly with the Dark Forest's miasma. Because his black magic matches the forest's corrupting aura, unleashing his power triggered an uncontrollable chain reaction that is rapidly tearing his body apart from the inside. Desperate to save him, Rashette spins around, yelling that every mage traveling through dangerous territory carries a mana suppressant. Weakly clutching his chest, Lucius gasps through blood-stained lips, pointing out that his retainers are holding his medicine supply. Rashette turns to the 2 royal aides, screaming at them to hand over the suppressant immediately. Instead of rushing over to help, the 2 retainers exchange a chilling, wicked smirk, standing perfectly still in the snow. "What are you doing? Hurry up!" Rashette screams frantically as Lucius's heavy body slumps against her shoulder. The 2 traitorous knights smoothly draw their sharp steel blades, coldly mocking the dying prince by declaring they've been waiting for this exact moment. Wow, top 10 anime betrayals right here. These guys deserve a one-way ticket to the Shadow Realm. Surrounded by the dark miasma, Lucius looks down at Rashette with heartbroken eyes, softly apologizing for dragging her into his execution. Lucius urges her to run into the thick woods behind her while she still has a chance to survive. Rashette stares back in utter disbelief, snort, unable to process his self-sacrificing words. Lucius gives her detailed instructions to hide in the deep brush, then trace the sled tracks back to safety once the coast is clear. Lucius, with blood dripping down his chin, gently rests his gloved hand on her golden hair, offering a frail, reassuring smile as he asks if she can do that for him. "If you stay here, you'll only hold me back," he whispers weakly, trying to force her away so she won't watch him get murdered. Rashette clutches the ribbon of her dress tightly, her small frame shaking violently in the freezing snow wind. With a sudden, firm shove, Lucius pushes her toward the snowy brush, roaring for her to go. Her instincts taking over, Rashette turns around and runs into the snow as fast as her small legs can move. High above the snowy canopy, narrative text questions why she is running away from the dying prince. Harsh reality sets in. If she stays behind without any magic or weapon, the 2 armed assassins will cut her down without a second thought. A chemical diagram reveals that magic medicines come in 2 forms: suppressants that calm chaotic mana, and forbidden amplifiers that force magic to surge wildly out of control. Flashback imagery shows the traitorous retainer offering Lucius a leather flask earlier. Rashette realizes with horror that the flask didn't contain water, it was spiked with a potent mana amplifier. The entire sinister plot unfolds in her mind. The court enemies didn't just hope a monster would kill him, they deliberately engineered a mana rampage. Spilled red blood frames the horrific conclusion. This entire hunt was a carefully orchestrated assassination plot to eliminate the crown prince. Memory flashes back to her library tutor, explaining that the imperial court despises Lucius simply because he was born to a low-ranking concubine. Slowing her frantic pace in the quiet forest, tears begin welling up in Rashette's eyes as the sheer cruelty of his life crushes her heart. She reflects on how everyone views Prince Lucius as an invincible, superhuman calamity, treating his endless suicide missions as someone else's problem. But standing right in front of him, she saw the undeniable truth. Underneath that scary black magic, he's just a fragile boy made of flesh and blood. The artist really pulled out all the stops for this scene. The emotional lighting is straight-up movie quality. She hangs her head, knowing that fighting off 2 full-fledged knights while experiencing a mana rampage is completely impossible. A warm memory flashes in her mind of Lucius smiling gently as he served her a hot bowl of homemade soup in his cozy cabin. Tears overflowed down her rosy cheeks as she whispers to herself that despite his terrifying reputation, he was the only person who treated her with genuine kindness. Horrific memories of her own abusive past resurface, her cruel noble family screaming at her for lacking magic and declaring her completely useless. Flashes show her father calling guards to restrain her and stripping away her title as a princess, leaving her broken and unwanted. She pictures Lucius's blood-stained face as he tried to protect her one last time, with utter defiance refusing to let another abandoned child suffer. Gritting her teeth, Rashette abruptly skids to a dead halt in the snow, tears streaming down her face as she turns right back around, yelling that claiming she's helpless is just a pathetic excuse to abandon someone who cared for her. Standing over the collapsed prince, the traitorous retainer looks down cold-heartedly at Lucius, writhing in agony from the dark mana rampage. With a sinister sneer, he mutters a fake apology, fully prepared to end the Crown Prince's life right then and there. Raising his heavy steel blade high above his head, the corrupted knight chuckles sinisterly, declaring that their orders were crystal clear. Make absolutely sure the Calamity Prince never leaves this forest alive. Wow, look at this guy, smiling like he just won the lottery. Karma's gonna hit him so hard. Spilling dark red blood onto the freezing snow, Lucius chokes out a desperate gasp, glaring up at his murderer through trembling eyes. "Wait!" he stammers, weak and helpless, but the traitor only laughs maniacally, reveling in his defenseless target. Just as the blade begins its lethal descent, a small boot steps firmly into the snow. Rashette comes marching right back onto the scene, her brilliant golden hair catching the freezing winter light as she boldly confronts the two-armed executioners. Clenching her trembling fingers over her chest, Rashette mentally reminds herself to stay calm. She knows perfectly well that she doesn't possess a single drop of mana in her current body, making a direct confrontation suicidal. Stepping directly into the assassin's path, she locks eyes with the armed traitors, pleading in a trembling voice to let her say one final goodbye to the prince who saved her life. Bro, she's literally using maximum child innocence to buy seconds. This girl's IQ is through the roof. Behind her back, Rashette stealthily presses her sharp fingernails into her palm, smearing her own fresh red blood across her skin. Narrative text reveals that underneath her terrified act, she is executing a calculated strategy. The assassin bursts into a cruel laugh, lowering his guard as he snorts at her ridiculous request, mocking her for running straight back into a meat grinder just to say goodbye to a dead man. Weakly looking up through the purple miasma, Lucius's violet eye widens in pure horror as he stammers out her name, completely heartbroken that she returned. Meanwhile, narrative text drops the bomb. In her previous life, Rashette was Rashumia Eldon, the legendary ancestor of all magic. Turning toward the helpless prince, Rashette flashes him the brightest, most reassuring smile in the entire world, her emerald eyes glowing with absolute confidence. The artist pulls out an absolute masterpiece panel here, the soft sunlight illuminating her glowing green eyes as she beams like a literal angel amidst the grim, bloody carnage. Look at that art quality. If that smile doesn't give him the will to live, nothing will. Completely stunned by her dazzling aura, Lucius can only gasp in utter confusion as Rashette swiftly swoops down beside him, brushing her bloody hand against his skin. Leaning in close, she whispers directly into his ear, giving him precise instructions while placing her blood-drawn mark directly onto his palm. Tired of their emotional farewell, the traitorous retainer snarls in annoyance, raising his bloody sword once again to chop them both down. "You can both die together!" he roars frantically, plunging his heavy blade straight down with full lethal momentum. Blood explodes violently across the snow, but instead of hitting Rashette, a blinding purple spark ignites as an unexpected counterattack shreds through the assassin. In a horrifying flash of speed, Lucius explodes upward. With pure demonic brutality, he grabs one retainer by the throat while driving his steel blade completely through the chest of the other traitor. The dead retainer collapses into the snow with a heavy thud as blood splatters across the frozen landscape. The remaining assassin gasps in sheer terror, unable to comprehend how a dying prince suddenly regained his superhuman speed. Close-up imagery reveals the truth. The bloody magic circle Rashette drew on Lucius's hand is burning with radiant purple light. His demonic eye ignites as the chaotic mana inside his body is instantly brought under control. "Damn you! How can you still move?" the surviving assassin screams in pure terror, frantically backing away as Lucius towers over him with a blood-soaked sword. Bro realized he went from executioner to prey in under 2 seconds flat. Without showing a shred of mercy, Lucius steps forward and brutally cleaves the second traitor in half, painting the white snow crimson in a single terrifying stroke. The traitor slumps onto the freezing ground, coughing up blood as he pathetically whimpers that they were only following orders from higher-ups in the royal court. Towering above the begging coward like a grim reaper of death, Lucius's face is completely shrouded in darkness, glowing purple eye radiating pure, unadulterated slaughter. The assassin lets out a pathetic squeak as the shadow of death falls over him. Blood spurts across the snowy background as Lucius silences the traitor permanently. Watching from a distance, little Rochette gasps in shock, her wide green eyes reflecting the visceral reality of imperial politics. The instant the threats are eliminated, the magical seal on Lucius's hand reaches its limit. He drops to one knee, driving a sword into the ground as he pants heavily in exhaustion, gasping through bloodied lips. Chibi Rochette instantly snaps out of her trance. In a total panic, she dumps out her travel pack in the snow, frantically tossing aside potions while screaming that she needs to find the mana suppressant right now. Found it, she yells triumphantly, holding up a sparkling glass flask filled with a glowing light blue liquid. Thank goodness. If she took any longer, Lucius would have passed out from sheer blood loss. Rushing over to the slumped prince, Rochette kneels in the snow, gently holding the glass bottle to his mouth while checking his faint pulse. Lucius gulps down the cool blue liquid as Rochette carefully tilts the flask, letting the suppressant settle the residual wild mana burning through his veins. Watching him closely, Rochette tilts her head with concern, asking softly if the medicine is working and if he feels any better. Close-up shot shows Rochette's tiny hands covered in scrapes and dried blood, holding the empty glass bottle tight. Whoa, she pushed her little body far beyond its limits just to save him. A gentle, peaceful smile returns to Lucius's pale face as he looks down at her. Yeah, thank goodness, he whispers softly, his heartbeat finally stabilizing. But as the tension fades, Lucius blinks, recalling something strange she said right before he attacked. By the way, earlier, he begins. Rochette blinks back, squeaking a flustered, "Huh?" Looking into her green eyes, Lucius asks with genuine curiosity why she specifically gave him a 30-second time limit, wondering what that secret countdown actually meant. Chibi Rochette turns beet red, frantically waving her hands while sweating bullets. That was, strictly speaking, there wasn't really a strict time limit, she stammers out. She points sheepishly at his palm, explaining that because she drew the magic formula using her own liquid blood, any moisture or smearing would instantly unravel the written pattern and break the spell. Actually, though, normally you draw magic circles using pure mana, so they never fade. Chibi Rochette yells frantically, waving her little hands in the air. But since I don't have mana in this body, I had no choice but to use blood. Lucius stares at her in absolute awe, his eyes wide with wonder as he softly asks her what on earth a magic formula actually is. Rochette freezes in utter disbelief, her mouth hanging wide open in pure shock. Wait, hold up. The Crown Prince who solos Calamity monsters doesn't even know what a basic magic circle is? The royal tutors really skipped the entire tutorial chapter. Rochette grabs a small fallen stick, pointing to a cute diagram drawn in the snow while breaking down the fundamentals of magic theory. You see, mana on its own is just a chaotic mass of raw power, she explains enthusiastically, leaning over the snow while Lucius listens intently like an obedient student. Showing simple stick figure diagrams and geometric circles in the snow, Rochette explains that when casting magic, a mage must provide precise mathematical instructions to direct that raw energy, a structure known as a magic formula and circle. She further explains that the blood circle she drew acted as an emergency barrier to temporarily seal his uncontrolled mana flow. But just as she gets carried away lecturing him, Chibi Rochette suddenly gasps in terror, realizing she just lectured the Crown Prince twice in one day. She nervously shrinks back, her green eyes wide with anxiety, as her inner thoughts start spiraling into dark memories. Flashback imagery reveals her traumatizing childhood in her former family. Cruel noble adults screaming at her for being too smart, slapping her face and branding her as an insolent, vulgar child for pointing out their logical mistakes. Remembering how her own parents hated her for being knowledgeable, Rochette hangs her head, bracing herself for Lucius to yell at her or slap her hand away. But instead, Lucius softly murmurs, "That's amazing!" Rochette snaps her head up in shock. Lucius offers her the warmest, most genuine smile she has ever seen, praising her from the bottom of his heart for being so incredibly smart and explaining complex theories so clearly. Soft snowflakes drift between them as Rochette stares back, her heart swelling with an emotion she has never felt before. For the first time in her life, someone genuinely appreciates her intellect instead of scorning her. Lucius tilts his head with an innocent, bright smile, asking if anyone can draw those magic formulas or if it's a special bloodline ability unique to the Eldon family. Meanwhile, Richette's inner voice screams that it's because she created modern magic in her past life. Frantically flailing her arms, Chibi Richette stammers out a totally unconvincing excuse, shouting that as the Eldon firstborn, she simply read thousands of old books in the library. Look at her fluster. This ancient grand mage is completely helpless against a sweet compliment. Lucius examines the detailed geometric diagram drawn in the snow, murmuring thoughtfully that mastering such vast knowledge must have required immense effort. Reaching down with his gloved hand, the Crown Prince tenderly pats Richette's soft golden hair with overwhelming warmth. Crouching right in front of her with a gentle smile, Lucius praises her softly, calling her a true hard worker. Richette stands frozen, the words echoing in her mind as her eyes widen in utter disbelief. Clutching her dress as tears gather in her eyes, Richette's mind flashes back to endless piles of heavy magical scrolls. In both lives, everyone only demanded flawless results, never once acknowledging her effort. Actually, imagine being a literal legendary grand mage and crying just because someone acknowledged your hard work for once. Memory fragments scroll past her consciousness, whether as the grand ancestor Rishumia or as the neglected daughter Richette. Failure was never permitted and success was taken for granted. Looking up into Lucius's soft violet eyes, she sees zero expectation or demand, only genuine kindness and sincere affection. Tears stream down her flushed cheeks as Chibi Richette rubs her eyes with her little sleeves, softly sniffling that she really did work so hard. Lucius keeps his gentle hand resting atop her golden locks, gently giving her all the time she needs to release years of bottled-up emotional pain. Minutes later, heavy boots tread firmly through the deep snow cover as the deadly battleground fades into the distance. Gathering the exhausted little girl securely in his arms, Lucius carries her safely out of the frozen forest, leaving the corpses of the defeated traitors behind. Wrapped inside his thick, fur-lined cloak, Richette buries her small face against his chest, feeling a cozy, comforting heat radiant enough to melt the harshest winter. Look at how peaceful she looks. She went from fighting assassins to getting a 5-star imperial ride. Lucius treads forward with the serene look on his face, quietly guarding the sleeping girl tucked safely against his heartbeat. But far above them, on a snow-laden branch, a mysterious hooded figure dressed in dark green cloaks quietly watches their departure before melting into the shadows. Meanwhile, deep inside the Grand Duke's manor, a frantic young nobleman screams at his butler upon hearing that the Crown Prince exited the Black Forest completely alive. Sitting behind his massive mahogany desk, the cold-eyed Duke Eldon sternly cuts off his son's bannock, noting they strictly followed court orders to remain uninvolved in the prince's monster hunting expedition. The sweat-drenched butler nervously shifts his stance, reporting that there is an even more alarming detail surrounding the prince's return. The Crown Prince was accompanied by an unidentified young girl when he descended the mountain, the butler exclaims. Both the Duke and his son freeze in absolute horror. Slamming his hands on the desk, Duke Eldon angrily scolds his foolish son, demanding to know why the discarded daughter wasn't eliminated as planned. The blonde young noble frantically makes excuses, shouting that no fragile child bleeding out in rags could possibly survive the Black Forest. Wow, the Eldon family really thought throwing a child into a monster pit was a bulletproof plan. Resting his chin on his hands with a dark, sinister gaze, Duke Eldon warns that if Richette reveals her abandonment to the Crown Prince, the Emperor will use it to crush their house. He orders an immediate investigation to identify the girl at all costs. Bright morning sunlight filters through luxurious lace curtains, illuminating a grand estate bedroom where little Richette reawakens on a plush featherbed. Sitting up groggily, Richette blinks her glowing green eyes, noticing her scraped hands have been neatly cleaned and wrapped in soft white bandages. Pushing open the massive double doors of her private guest suite, she rubs her sleepy eyes while stepping into the hallway. "Good morning, Richie." A smooth voice greets her from above. She gasps, looking up at a towering pair of dark leather boots. Sunlight bathes Lucius in a heavenly halo as he stands before her wearing relaxed indoor robes, holding a steaming bowl of warm soup with the dazzling smile of an anime prince. The artist pulled out every shiny sparkle filter for this entrance panel. Dressed in a cozy white morning gown tied with a golden bow, Chibi Rochette beams brightly, giggling back with an adorable childish grin. Minutes later, we're at a sprawling, lavish dining table, and they're enjoying a quiet breakfast of fresh bread and vegetable stew. Munching on her meal, Rochette recalls passing out cold from exhaustion while Lucius carried her down the mountain yesterday afternoon. Watching her eat, Lucius tilts his head with undeniable affection, holding his spoon while gently tracking her every cue movement. As the morning calm settles in, Lucius flashes her another radiant, heartwarming smile across the table. Rochette smiles back politely, but internally, a sudden wave of sheer, unadulterated terror violently hits her brain. Her spoon freezes inches above her soup bowl as her inner voice begins frantically recalculating her life choices. Wait a second, I've been talking casually to the freaking crown prince since yesterday? Chibi Rochette internally screams while clutching her reddening face in total horror. Her panic explodes into full paranoid fantasy, imagining an imperial judge locking her little neck into a sharp guillotine for treason. Girl, you saved his life twice and you're worried about royal grammar etiquette? Noticing her sudden frozen stance, Lucius blinks his purple eyes in mild concern, calling her name softly. You haven't touched your soup. Is everything okay? Lucius asks gently. Chibi Rochette waves her hands frantically like a wind turbine, squeaking out that everything is totally fantastic. Resting his cheek on his palm, Lucius chuckles softly, happy that she feels comfortable. But deep down, Rochette knows she is walking on thin imperial ice. Looking down at her bandaged hands, she scoops up a small portion of warm vegetable broth with her spoon. She quietly sips the delicious soup, her brilliant mind working overtime to figure out her next strategic move. Lucius continues watching her with a warm, relaxed expression, completely content just sharing a quiet morning meal together. Realizing that finishing this meal means she will likely be handed over to imperial guards or sent off to an orphanage, Rochette knows her time is running out. Suddenly breaking the silence, Lucius leans forward with bright eyes, calling out her nickname gently. Rochette snaps to attention with a stiff, nervous yes. If you don't mind, could you tell me more about magic like you did yesterday? Lucius asks with an eager, sparkling grin. Rochette blinks blankly, completely caught off guard by his unexpected request. Huh? A quick memory replay shows Lucius awkwardly blushing in the snow yesterday, confessing that despite his monstrous power, he knows almost nothing about basic magic theory. I'd really love it if you could teach me the fundamentals, Lucius continues, looking toward the sunlit window like an eager student waiting for class to start. A literal light bulb ignites inside Rochette's mind as her emerald eyes sparkle with sudden brilliant realization. Wait a minute, we might not have to part ways after all, her inner voice echoes triumphantly. Her mental imagery shifts from a sad orphan cage cart to a glorious master plan. Since Lucius has zero clue how magic works, she can easily make herself indispensable as his personal private tutor. Analyzing his chaotic purple mana from yesterday, she notes that his power is legendary tier, but completely unrefined and extremely dangerous without proper instruction. By stepping in as his official magic instructor, she guarantees her safety inside the Imperial Palace. Rochette turns her golden head, calling out softly to the prince. Lucius tilts his head with a gentle hum, giving her his full, undivided attention. Raising her tiny bandaged finger, Rochette adopts the stern posture of a miniature professor, lecturing him that true spellcraft is a deeply complex discipline that no one can master overnight. Illustrating her point, she explains that conquering magic demands relentless study, immense theoretical knowledge, practical application, and above all else, an exceptional teacher, she declares with absolute pride. Lucius blinks softly, giggle, amused by her dramatic speech. Leaning forward with sparkling emerald eyes, Rochette officially makes her big sales pitch, offering to become his personal magic master right then and there. Lucius blinks in mild surprise, a sweat drop forming on his cheek as he takes in her adorable enthusiasm. Internally, Rochette pats herself on the back for coming up with a master stroke that guarantees her room and board inside Imperial territory. Her imagination runs completely wild with chibi fantasies of the crown prince kneeling in tearful gratitude while showering her with grand rewards. Talk about top-tier delusion. Clearing her throat with proper etiquette, she prepares to lay down her credentials with utmost seriousness. She brags that while her current child body lacks mana, her mind holds every grimoire's wisdom, making her the finest magical genius capable of inventing brand new theories. Pointing her finger high in the air, she promises that her theoretical knowledge easily rivals the Tower Master, guaranteeing to permanently cure his mana overloads. She keeps piling on extra incentives, frantically waving her little arms like an infomercial host trying to close a door-to-door deal. Lucius rests his chin on his palm, watching her adorable performance with a soft, affectionate smirk. Look at this stunning visual panel. The artist threw in a full-blooming flower background just to highlight his breathtaking anime prince smile. Lucius playfully presses for more details, causing Rachette to stammer as her sales pitch runs completely out of steam. Panicking, Chibi Rachette frantically promises to construct custom dark magic formulas specifically for him, while he just nods lazily like a relaxed cat. Suddenly, a strange sense of hesitation halts her mid-sentence as she looks at his unbothered smile. Desperate to seal the deal, Chibi Rachette screams that she'll even throw in custom textbooks completely free of charge. Internally sweating bullets, she wonders if he's even taken her seriously, but vows that a former Grand Mage cannot back down now. Girl, you're a literal legendary Grand Mage. Why are you offering maid services now? She's out here promising to cook and clean just to secure room and board. Lucius completely loses his cool composure, throwing his head back in genuine burst-out laughter at her utter desperation. Wiping a tear of joy from his eye, he chuckles softly, confessing under his breath that she is simply too adorable to resist. Rachette stands completely frozen, her eyes wide with total bewilderment at his sudden emotional outburst. A sharp twitch runs across her eyebrow as the real realization of what just happened hits her brain. "You tricked me!" Chibi Rachette fumes, shaking her tiny fists in rage while Lucius waves his hands apologetically with a nervous laugh. She turns her head away with a pout, threatening to cancel the lessons entirely, which prompts Lucius to adopt a surprisingly serious expression. Surprised by his sudden shift in tone, Rachette glances back at him in confusion. She wonders what he means as the golden chandelier above casts a quiet, elegant light over the dining hall. Rising smoothly from his seat, Lucius drops his casual demeanor and addresses her with formal imperial respect. Kneeling down on one knee right before her high chair, the crown prince places himself lower than her, looking up with absolute sincerity. Rachette gazes down at him in total shock, her breath catching as the imperial heir bows humbly before an outcast child. Seriously, the artist went all out on this kneeling frame. He looks less like a dangerous prince and more like a fairy tale knight taking a sacred oath. Twisting a strand of golden hair around her bandaged finger, Rachette flushes deep red, stammering out that she accepts his proposal. Chibi Lucius smiles triumphantly while Chibi Rachette grumps to herself, realizing she got played like a fiddle. Leaning in closer, Lucius casually suggests dropping formal speech between them, catching her completely off guard again. It'd be strange for a master to speak formally to her student. He smiles warmly, asking her to simply call him Lucius. Rachette blinks her emerald eyes, completely floored by his natural charm and total lack of royal pride. As she stares into his purple eyes, her inner voice asks the ultimate question. Why does it feel like she's been dancing in the palm of his hand this entire time? Hours later, a magnificent golden carriage rolls smoothly through the sunlit imperial forest path towards the capital. Rachette reviews their official deal. She teaches him foundational magic, and in return, he grants her complete protection from the Elden House and a brand new noble status whenever needed. Sitting across from him in his regal blue coat, she can't help but wonder why he offered such ridiculously favorable terms for simple magic lessons. However, whatever minor doubts linger in her mind are about to be shattered in the most unexpected way. The moment their carriage arrives at the imperial capital, all her assumptions get tossed right out the window. Lucius steps down first, gesturing toward his private residence with a polite smile. Rachette steps out and immediately freezes, her jaw dropping in absolute horror. A quick flashback reveals her asking earlier if they were heading to the Grand Palace, to which he nonchalantly agreed. She had terrified visions of running into the Emperor, Empress, or her scary grandfather wandering the royal corridors. Lucius had reassured her not to worry, casually mentioning that his personal quarters were slightly separate. Turns out slightly separate meant the isolated, neglected, detached palace tucked away at the edge of the forest grounds. It's pitch black black, zero lights, no servants, not even a fire in the hearth. Rashette internally screams as she stares at cobwebs inside the crown prince's abandoned mansion. Bro is literally first in line for the throne, living like a haunted house ghost. Rashette panics as she looks around the dusty interior, demanding to know where all the servants are hiding, only for Lucius to drop a total bombshell that not a single maid is stationed here. Her jaw hits the floor as she realizes she just stepped into a literal abandoned haunted house. And striking a match to light the wall sconce, Lucius chuckles softly, teasingly claiming that calling his residence a ghost town is a bit harsh. Bro, look at the cobwebs on the ceiling. She's totally right. Sunlight streams through the grand stained glass windows, revealing a surprisingly gorgeous two-story lobby complete with plush blue velvet couches and a sweeping staircase. Rashette slams her fist onto her hand, passionately insisting that the Imperial staff is blatantly disrespecting him, but Lucius merely waves off her concerns with a nonchalant smile. He lazily explains that castle servants only drop by twice a day to run quick errands, so he gets by just fine. Chibi Rashette's head practically explodes with rage. Her inner villain mind cannot handle his insanely low self-esteem. Lucius tilts his head thoughtfully, pointing out that since he's barely ever home anyway, the arrangement makes total sense. No, it does not. You're the crown prince, she screams internally, baffled by his lack of basic royal pride. Opening his bedroom door, Lucius casually invites her to take his bed for the night so she can rest up. Rashette grumps into her pillow under the starry night sky, utterly exhausted by this giant pushover of a prince. The next morning dawns bright and clear over the quiet, isolated, detached palace. Sitting on a tall wooden stool, Rashette swings her tiny legs back and forth, mentally reviewing how indebted she is to him despite his weird living conditions. She watches in complete disbelief as the literal heir to the imperial throne happily fetches his own bathwater like a common farmhand. Talk about a bizarre sight for a grand mage. Not wanting to be a total freeloader, the former duke's daughter picks up a small knife and begins meticulously peeling potatoes for breakfast. Lucius turns around with a heavy iron pot, gently asking if she can hand over the chopped vegetables whenever she's finished. Rashette chirps out a sweet agreement, happy to help out. Realizing they need carbs, Rashette asks if they have any bread, to which Lucius casually mentions the delivery maid should be arriving any second. Right on cue, a maid pushes a wooden supply cart through the kitchen door, formally announcing today's meager ration delivery for His Imperial Highness. Lucius politely directs her to set the food on the counter, but the maid's eyes suddenly land on Rashette chopping away at the table. The servant narrows her eyes, demanding to know who this strange child is. Setting down his container, Lucius casually explains that he rescued the young girl in the forest during yesterday's beast time. He offers his signature angel boy smile, expecting the staff member to simply carry on with her duties like normal. Instead, the maid's expression turns instantly icy as she glares down at the extra mouth to feed. Look at this arrogant attitude. She's looking at the crown prince like he's an annoying customer at a retail job. Placing her hands on the cart handle, the maid snidely lectures the prince that any change in meal portions requires formal prior approval. Otherwise, it creates unnecessary trouble for the staff. Rashette stops her knife mid-peel, her emerald eyes twitching in absolute disgust at the servant's audacity. But to Rashette's horror, Lucius actually bows his head, meekly apologizing for the extra burden and promising it won't happen again. Rashette's brain screams in utter shock. Are you seriously apologizing to a maid? A sudden vision flashes in her mind, remembering how he fights terrifying monsters all alone in the freezing snow, only to come home and get bullied by housekeepers. Staring at Lucius's passive posture, Rashette realizes that the abusive staff isn't the only problem here. The prince's complete lack of self-worth is enabling them. The maid smugly huffs that she'll try to manage extra bread tomorrow, but won't guarantee anything. Suddenly, a cold, sharp voice calls out from the table, "You." The maid twitches in surprise, glancing down with condescending annoyance at the tiny blonde child who dared address her. Rashette places her knife down with a terrifyingly sweet, innocent smile, gently asking the maid what her name is. Before the maid can answer, Rashette turns her golden head toward Lucius, sweetly asking if he knows the housekeeper's name. Lucius stammers out an awkward, "No." Rashette beams brilliantly, telling the prince that there's absolutely no need for him to apologize. After all, why would His Highness bother remembering the name of a lowly servant whose only job is wheeling in bread? Rashette sneers smoothly, causing the maid to break out into a nervous sweat. She keeps driving the needle in, asking for the head supervisor's name instead, before cutting herself off with a chilling gaze. Hoo boy, the Grand Mage persona is fully activating. Leaning forward off her wooden stool, Rachette points her finger directly at Lucius, asking the maid in a dark, ominous tone if she even recognizes the gentleman standing in front of her. The room temperature drops to absolute zero as that arrogant maid finally registers the dangerous shift in the atmosphere. Look at the dramatic shadow work in this panel. The artist cooked so hard. Sweating bullets beneath Rachette's suffocating glare, the maid stammers out the Crown Prince's full noble name. Rachette nods satisfied, confirming that his name is known across the entire empire as the supreme heir to the throne. Twirling her small utility knife with lethal precision, Rachette casually reminds her that the prince could order her execution in a single second. The maid's face completely drains of color as dark, oppressive aura flares up behind Rachette's miniature frame. "Do you understand now?" the tiny terror whispers. Hopping off her stool, Rachette steps toward the terrified servant, mimicking her exact condescending words back to her face with savage precision. Standing right in front of her, Rachette lectures her on proper servant etiquette, smirking that His Highness's legendary kindness is the only reason she still has a head on her shoulders. Rachette glances over her shoulder, asking Lucius if he agrees. The poor prince blinks in utter bewilderment, stammering out a timid agreement as he watches his tiny tutor take total control. Turning back with a wicked grin, Rachette commands the maid to restart the interaction and properly prepare full guest supplies for her starting tomorrow morning. Her glowing green eye glares into the maid's soul like an ancient predator demanding total obedience. "Your reply?" she demands. The thoroughly broken housekeeper drops her eyes, bowing her head in complete, trembling submission as she squeaks out an agreement. "Good. You may leave now," Rachette dismisses her, causing the maid to bolt out the door like a scared rabbit escaping a dragon's den. That was the cleanest verbal beatdown ever. Sitting down at the dining table to enjoy their soup, Lucius scratches his cheek, awkwardly asking if she wasn't being a little too mean to the staff. Chibi Rachette throws her hands up in absolute exasperation, sarcastic, screaming that he is way too soft for his own good. Pointing her finger right at his chest, she angrily lectures him that the staff only walks all over him because he lets them. A quick flashback shows Lucius meekly stirring the pot while begging the maid for extra bread like a peasant asking for scraps. Rachette sternly warns him that an imperial ruler must never apologize to subordinates so easily, as it destroys their authority. Staring deeply into his purple eyes, she prepares to drop the ultimate harsh truth bomb on her new royal pupil. Slamming her hands on the table, Rachette points straight at his nose and yells that he has absolute zero dignity. Lucius looks so stunned, his magic tutoring hasn't even officially started and he's already getting roasted alive. Rachette remembers lesson number 1 from her past life grind. Acting humble when you have real power is an absolute mistake. Meanwhile, Chibi Lucius just blinks his large purple eyes like a clueless puppy, completely unaware of the lecture coming his way. Lucius gently offers a spoonful of hot soup toward her mouth, but Rachette's intense lecturing mode doesn't stop for a single second. She leans over the dining table, sternly explaining that in this cold world, some people react well to kindness, while others just take total advantage of it. She fires off a warning that leechers will walk all over his good nature, get arrogant, and strip him of everything he owns. Being humble is a grandmaster strategy, not something a pushover should attempt. She's practically giving him a masterclass in corporate survival. "If you don't start carrying yourself like a real imperial heir, everyone in this palace is going to wipe their boots on you," she screams out, watching him casually rise from his seat. Sitting back down with a peaceful smile, Lucius quietly replies that he's listening. Rachette's eyes twitch in utter exasperation as she asks if his brain is even processing her words. Bro is totally unfazed by her anger. Lucius gently places his hand on her head, softly chuckling that it's cute how hard she tries for everything. Rachette's jaw drops. He wasn't taking her noble masterclass seriously at all. Softening his expression, Lucius gently reassures her that he truly understands what she's trying to teach him. He gazes off into the distance, his soft purple eyes carrying a strangely distant, gentle sadness that contrasts his carefree demeanor. Rachette catches a glimpse of his profile, noticing the subtle shift in his mood and wondering what's really going on inside his head. Lucius tilts his head with an angelic smirk, politely asking his tiny master if they can begin today's magic instruction now. Clenching her fists, Rachette huffs in total defeat, shouting out a grumpy "fine" because she can't resist his puppy dog charm. She's so easily swayed. Later that evening, Rachette lies spread eagle on the giant canopy bed, staring up at the quiet night sky as thoughts swirl in her head. She recalls his casual statement about not caring how people treat him or whether servants disrespect his imperial title. He really doesn't care, huh? Whispers she to herself, analyzing his complete detachment from social hierarchy and prestige. She ponders whether he's genuinely a saint who harbors zero malice or if he's simply empty inside, concluding it's probably a mix of both. In her mind, she recognizes that while he treats everyone with equal gentleness, he also keeps an invisible wall between himself and the rest of the world. He took her in out of pity when she was helpless and perhaps saw some value in her legendary Grand Mage abilities during their monster encounter. But deep down, a troubling question lingering in her mind keeps her awake. Does he truly possess no desire for self-preservation? Stepping her bare feet onto the cold carpet, Rachette walks out toward the moonlit corridor, reminding herself that true trust isn't built overnight. Besides, I'm just using his royal house as a cover to survive, so it's a mutual business transaction anyway, she reassures her tsundere conscience. Telling herself it's silly to feel slightly hurt by his detachment, she suddenly catches sight of a lone figure standing on the exterior balcony under the moonlight. Lucius turns his head as the breeze rustles his silvery hair, casting an ethereal glow around his quiet smile. Stepping onto the balcony, Rachette asks why he's awake at this hour. Lucius chuckles that he's just catching fresh air, asking if she couldn't sleep too. He leans against the stone balustrade, admitting he was reflecting on their battle in the Black Forest, specifically whether he ought to formally thank her or not. He softly explains that while gratitude is owed, he worried thanking her would encourage her to stay in a dangerous place where she could get hurt, wondering aloud if scolding her for returning was the proper move instead. Listening to his words, Rachette lowers her head, realizing her initial instincts about his complex mind were completely spot on. She steps forward, quietly telling him that if an apprentice makes a foolish choice, a proper master would indeed scold them. But she adds with a faint smirk that even if scolded, a stubborn girl likely wouldn't listen next time anyway, though a simple thank you would still make her day. She calls him out on ignoring his own feelings and brushing off the genuine danger surrounding his life as if it doesn't matter. Rachette notes that you never ask someone directly whether you should thank them or scold them. Lucius laughs warmly, acknowledging her logic and choosing to offer a sincere thanks instead. Under the vast starry sky, Lucius looks down and genuinely thanks her for rescuing his life in the forest. Rachette accepts it with a proud, composed grin. Breaking the peaceful mood, Rachette looks up into his eyes and poses the core question. Why is someone constantly trying to assassinate him? Lucius turns his head towards the night horizon, shrugs casually, saying he doesn't know the exact reason behind his targeted life. A shadowy image of the Empress flashes in the dark. Lucius softly admits that high-ranking nobles want him eliminated, yet he holds no grudge or hatred against them whatsoever. Why on earth would you not blame people trying to murder you? Rachette asks bewilderedly. Lucius quietly replies that in his mind, their resentment toward his existence is entirely justified. In that heavy moment, the dark truth hits Rachette like a tidal wave. His constant, gentle smile isn't joy, it's the peaceful expression of someone who has completely given up on living. Asking if he intends to just submit to fate, Lucius answers with chilling calmness that he fights back when possible, but if he fails, he'll simply accept death without complaint. Hearing his suicidal nonchalance, Rachette's mana flares up as she cuts him off with resolute conviction. I will make you strong enough so no one can ever push you around, she declares, clutching her chest with fierce determination, while refusing to let him throw his life away. She sternly lectures him that no one is obligated to die just because enemies hate their existence. Even if a wall exists between their master-apprentice bond, she won't stand by and watch him surrender. Standing tall despite her tiny stature, the ancient Grand Mage vows to forge him into an invincible force, secretly swearing to protect this foolish prince at all costs. Watching her fiery passion, Lucius breaks into a radiant, genuine smile, softly whispering that his little teacher is truly the most dependable person in the world. Meanwhile, at the majestic Imperial Palace, a bowing butler finishes giving a secret status report to the Grand Throne Room, where the Empress rests on her golden chair. Watching the garden through her stained glass window, the Empress narrows her eyes, bitterly noting that the Crown Prince somehow survived yet another lethal beast hunt unharmed. She reflects on Lucius Arcadia, terrifying warrior who slaughters every demon monster thrown at him, whose sole weakness was his uncontrollable mana rampages that she spent years orchestrating. She had forbidden all mage contact to keep him ignorant of magic control and hired elite assassins, yet the cursed boy continuously defied death. Talk about the ultimate overbearing evil stepmother plot. Clenching her fists, she realizes she must eliminate him immediately to secure the throne for her own birth child. A quick vision shows her precious younger prince sitting peacefully with a book, the innocent child she is desperately trying to elevate to supreme ruler. I must execute him very soon, the Empress mutters under her breath, unaware that a reincarnated 500-year-old Grand Mage has just become his personal bodyguard. Back at the Imperial Palace, the evil stepmother Empress grinds her stage teeth in utter disbelief, wondering how on earth Lucius managed to walk away completely unharmed after suffering a massive mana rampage. Her loyal spy butler, bowing before her, softly reports that the Crown Prince didn't return alone. He actually brought an unfamiliar young girl back with him from the depths of the Black Forest. Meanwhile, back at the prince's detached mansion, Lucius stands tall near the grand entrance, while tiny Richette gazes up at him in her fancy red dress. Glancing back with an angelic smile, Lucius cheerfully announces that he's taking his leave to report to the palace. Richette brightly waves her small hand back, wishing him a safe trip while maintaining her sweet child persona. But just as he takes 2 steps out, Lucius abruptly freezes in his tracks, as if his overprotective instincts suddenly spiked. Dropping down to one knee, he grips both of her shoulders tightly and sternly warns her never to step outside the mansion premises or open the front door for strangers. Pushing against his arms, Richette's face turns red as she aggressively yells at him to just go already. Man is acting like an anxious parent dropping his kid off at kindergarten for the very first time. Watching his long black coat disappear across the palace grounds, Richette sighs that all this dramatic parting energy makes it look like a long journey, when he's literally just walking over to hand in a routine report to the Emperor. Staring at the closed door, she ponders whether this guy is genuinely indifferent to people or secretly the most suffocatingly overprotective guardian on the planet. She notes that since the Crown Prince gets deployed on beast hunts most of the year, she urgently needs to forge a cover identity before he leaves again, completely oblivious to 2 dark hooded figures watching her through the window. A bit later, Richette heads out into the estate garden, decked out in cute green gardening overalls and a headscarf, ready for some labor. Crouching down in the dirt, she decides she might as well pull out weeds and clean up the vegetable patch while Lucius is away. A hilarious daydream flashes in her head, where chibi Lucius pats her head saying, "Good girl, Rishi," making her smudge her cheek with dirt while smirking in total pride. Suddenly remembering his strict "don't leave the mansion" order, she pauses mid-weed, giving a deadpan look. She quickly justifies her actions, telling herself that staying within the estate's private vegetable garden totally counts as staying on the property. As she yanks up another stray weed, she wonders why a literal crown prince is living semi-self-sufficiently and eating homegrown veggies like a suburban gardener. Talk about an extreme budget royalty lifestyle. Suddenly, 2 massive hooded figures burst out and slam her flat onto the dirt, aggressively shouting to restrain her before the prince returns. Bound with heavy ropes and gagged with a cloth strip, Richette struggles violently, immediately recognizing the emblem on their cloaks. These kidnappers are envoys sent directly from House Arden. Tying the knot tighter, one kidnapper hesitatingly asks if they should really be treating a duke's daughter like a sack of potatoes. Richette lies pinned on the cold ground, tears of anger welling in her eyes as she glares death stares at her captors. Ignoring his partner's worries, the lead thug roughly hauls her up, shouting at them to hurry and take her away. Refusing to be taken quietly, Richette drives her elbow straight into the thug's gut with full force, sending him wheezing back. "You little brat!" the furious thug roars, violently yanking her golden hair backward in retaliation. Squirming desperately in the dirt as they pin her back down, Richette inwardly screams for Lucius to save her from being dragged back. The main thug turns around and furiously yells at a third hooded accomplice standing casually in the background, asking what on earth he's been doing this whole time. Pinning Richette's arms behind her, forceful, the thug commands the third guy to hold down her legs and help secure the ropes. Out of nowhere, the third hooded figure delivers a thunderous flying kick straight into the lead thug's jaw, sending him flying. Turning on a dime, the mysterious third guy launches a swift back kick that obliterates the second kidnapper, knocking both attackers out cold. Kneeling down beside the bound girl, the savior softly addresses her in a quiet voice. He gently lowers the cloth gag from her face, softly asking if she's all right. Pulling back his dark hood, he reveals messy black hair and sharp golden eyes, quietly calling out, "Master." Rachette's eyes widen in sheer shock as she stammers out his name, "Noah!" But instead of tears of gratitude, Rachette immediately explodes in rage, screaming at him for taking so long to step in and save her. Bro literally waited for her to get dragged in the dirt before making his cool entry. Meanwhile, those two ardent kidnappers are tied up against a tree. They're just comatose with spiral eyes and swollen faces. Crossing her arms while sitting cross-legged on a garden chair, Rachette glares at him, demanding to know why he's even here in the first place. Standing tall, surrounded by floating blue flowers, Noah casually replies that there was 0 point in serving House Arden without his master there. Rachette's chibi face distorts in total exasperation as she screams that that wasn't what she meant at all. A quick flashback reveals Noah's true identity. He is actually the crow familiar bound to her past life self, Rishumia Eldon. When Rachette turned 8, Noah mysteriously awakened in a human body deep inside the Black Forest. To stay by her side during her current life, he went undercover as a house servant at the Arden ducal mansion. Rachette points an accusing finger at him, demanding to know why he didn't save her when her family abandoned her in the Black Forest. Noah casually touches his lip, replying that the head chef had sent him on an errand at that exact moment. An errand? Rachette yells, her soul practically leaving her body at his ridiculous excuse. Noah explains that since a Fazilier's power directly depends on their master's magic, he was completely drained and helpless when her powers were sealed anyway. He adds that he was the one who is truly shocked by the situation. He explains that before he knew it, his master had vanished from the Duchy of Arden, and people were claiming the princess was a fake who wasn't the legitimate child. Hearing those harsh words, Rachette lowers her head, a heavy sadness creeping over her. Clenching her fist tightly on her lap, she softly whispers that the rumors aren't true. She really is her parents' legitimate child. Noah solemnly adds that her younger sister manifested holy white magic instead, leading the entire duchy to claim the real princess ran away once her identity was exposed. Noah explains that he didn't understand what was happening, so he slipped in among the men sent to capture her just to scout out the situation. Looking down at her, Noah softly asks if he was wrong. Since she was always so obsessed with the ducal house and her family, he assumed she secretly wanted to go back. Rachette hangs her head low, the weight of Noah's blunt words heavy on her heart. Looking back, she remembers how Noah always despised her noble family, often watching from the shadows while her mother scolded her. Young Rachette used to boast back then, childishly insisting that once her magic awakened, her parents would weep with absolute joy over her genius. She only spoke so highly of them back then because she feared that if she admitted the truth, Noah would end up completely hating her family. Noah gazes down at her with genuine concern, pointing out that even if House Arden wanted her back, treating her so roughly proved where their true feelings lay. Seriously? How can anyone call themselves family after dragging a kid through the mud with heavy ropes? Talk about the absolute worst parenting ever. Flashback images of the brutal abduction flash in her mind, showing just how cruel her kin really were. Rachette stays silent, her heart aching as the reality of her family's betrayal cuts deeper than any physical wound. Noah doesn't hold back, bluntly stating that from the violent way those thugs treated her, her parents clearly didn't care whether she came back dead or alive. But Rachette suddenly leaps to her feet with a sharp yell. Standing upright, tears spill down her bruised cheeks as she desperately fights against the painful truth staring her right in the face. She clings to memories of what a real family should be, desperately wishing for the warmth and affection she was always denied. With her voice cracking, she stammers that it's all just a big misunderstanding and that her family must still love her deep down. Wow, the angst here is hitting hard, but watching her defend people who literally threw her away is painful. Someone give this poor girl a hug already. Flashback visions show her father hugging her younger sister while ignoring her in the background. She remembers running toward her smiling parents, constantly seeking the affection they lavished entirely on her younger sibling instead. The reason they don't love me is because I haven't done enough. Rachette screams out in pure agony, completely losing her composure. Noah reaches out, urgently telling her to snap out of it, when suddenly Lucius bursts through the grand double doors screaming her name. Rachette stands frozen, her tiny hands clutching her dirt-smudged dress as tears continue to stream down her flushed face. She tightly grips the fabric over her heart, completely overwhelmed by the explosive emotional outburst. Stepping into the hall, Lucius flares a terrifying aura of lethal purple magic, his icy eyes locking onto Noah as he coldly asks if this intruder made his master cry. Rachette looks up in horror, seeing the sheer murderous intent radiating off the crown prince. Drawing his blade with terrifying speed, Lucius prepares to slice Noah to pieces, but Rachette hurls her body forward and frantically tackles his waist, screaming for him to stop. Hugging his waist tightly, Rachette scolds him for channeling his volatile magic again, while Lucius stammers back that he was just trying to protect her. Look at how fast the genre swapped from tragic heartbreak to cheapy comedy. Lucius going from terrifying demon swordmaster to a scolded puppy in 3 seconds is peak cinema. Chibi Lucius sheepishly twiddles his fingers together while Rachette fumes at him. Glancing away with a cute pout, the prince mutters that he was genuinely terrified that something horrible had happened to her. Meanwhile, Noah sits flattened on the polished wooden floor, staring up at the terrifying swordmaster in complete and utter disbelief. Pointing a trembling finger upward, Noah frantically asks his master who on earth this terrifying monster of a man even is. Honestly, poor Noah thought he was the ultimate crow familiar, only to get completely flexed on by an overprotective prince. Welcome to the household, buddy. Rachette casually pats Lucius's waist, explaining that Noah was only terrified because of Lucius's unique magic attribute. Lucius blinks in confusion, tilting his head as he questions what's so strange about his magic property. Lucius notes that pure black magic is something normal humans aren't supposed to possess, and Rachette nods, revealing there's bubbling up even deeper reason behind Noah's fear. A vision reveals Noah's true nature as a crow born from the Black Forest's miasma, meaning Lucius's dark magic literally exerts dominant control over his life force, triggering primal terror. Placing a hand on Lucius, Rachette brightly introduces him to Noah, proudly announcing that the crown prince is actually her prized disciple. Noah gasps in total shock. Rachette smirks with total confidence, thoroughly enjoying Noah's dumbfounded expression. She quickly adds that Noah is now her personal attendant, covering up their true familiar bond with a convenient cover story. Classic Rachette, fabricating a cover story on the fly while leaving everyone around her completely confused. Her improv skills deserve an Oscar. Clenching her fists with sparkling eyes, Rachette theatrically rehearses her story, claiming Noah heroically saved her from House Eldon's kidnappers. Chibi Lucius deadpans, softly nodding along as if he totally buys this wildly dramatic lie. Lucius casually mentions that her cover story definitely explains the 2 thugs tied up outside in the garden. A quick flashback shows the 2 tied kidnappers desperately hopping away like caterpillars, while Chibi Lucius looms behind them like a dark shadow. Lucius nonchalantly explains that since they tried to waddle away, he simply kicked them back into unconsciousness. Rachette gives him a complete deadpan approval. Turning to Noah, Lucius sincerely apologizes for losing his temper and snapping at him earlier, leaving Noah completely flustered by the sudden politeness. Lucius analyzes the situation strategically, pointing out that officially turning over House Eldon's agents to the court could trigger a political crisis that even the Emperor couldn't easily resolve. Rachette sighs softly, agreeing that since her family guards the Black Forest, exposing them right now would cause more trouble than it's worth. But Lucius grins evil sparks, suggesting they thoroughly interrogate the thugs before kicking them out, making Rachette excitedly ask if she can beat them up with a wooden sword and a water bucket. Lucius happily offers her a wooden sword, and Rachette twirls around in pure delight like she's about to enter a toy store. Look at Noah's face. He is utterly horrified by this master-disciple duo taking so much pleasure in torture. Run for your life, kidnappers! Out in the yard, the 2 kidnappers hang upside down from a tree like salami, while Rachette brandishes a wooden sword and Lucius holds a bucket of cold water. After some gentle convincing, the thugs spill everything, revealing House Eldon definitely knows Rachette is staying with the Crown Prince. Dropping the interrogation gear, Lucius turns to her, warning that it's only a matter of time before the Duke formally demands her return. Sheathing her wooden sword, Rashette looks up at him with a clever glint in her eyes, announcing that she already has a brilliant counterplan ready. The very next morning, an ornate royal carriage rolls smoothly down the dirt road toward a brand new destination. Sitting inside an elegant light blue velvet robes, Rashette reflects on her plan. The fastest way to gain protected status is through official accreditation at the Magic Tower, an autonomous free city immune to both imperial politics and House Elden's domain. Rashette explains her strategic maneuver. If her parents claim the exiled daughter was a fraud who ran away, painting her as a villain only earns the ducal house cheap sympathy. But if she establishes herself at the prestigious Magic Tower and proves her true talent, they won't be able to deny her noble birthright. Lucius listens intently, pondering her surprisingly shrewd plan. Rashette slams her hands onto the polished desk with a loud bang, leaning forward with burning passion as she locks eyes with the crown prince. With her bright green eyes sparkling, Rashette brightly asks Lucius to write her a formal letter of recommendation to the Magic Tower, completely confident that her genius will handle the rest. Lucius gazes down at her in awe, reflecting on how smart, brave, and remarkably quick-witted she really is. He remembers how she saved his life despite having no formal training, realizing her hidden magical potential must be off the charts. As Lucius begins drafting the recommendation letter, he watches her passionately explain her magic theory. He thinks to himself that she undoubtedly belongs among the most exceptionally gifted mages in the kingdom. Rashette softly folds her hands over her heart, harboring a quiet hope deep inside that gaining the Magic Tower's recognition will finally prove her worth. She naively envisions a future where her parents finally see her value, imagining herself returning home to help refine her younger sister Selena's magic so her family will finally accept her. Watching her starry-eyed hope from across the carriage, Lucius silently breaks inside. He knows her heartless parents will never give her the affection she craves, but he can't bear to shatter her illusion, especially knowing he can't stay by her side forever. Softly smiling to conceal his inner pain, Lucius decides it's better to keep his depressing thoughts to himself and let her dream for just a little longer. Inside the luxurious rolling carriage, Rashette leans forward and asks if dropping by the Magic Tower unannounced is actually safe, curious if his recommendation letter will be enough to grant them entry. Lucius smiles warmly, reassuring her that when dealing with the eccentric mages of the Magic Tower, dropping in unannounced is actually the most effective strategy. Meanwhile, high inside the grand marble halls of the Magic Tower, Deputy Tower Master Khaled grips his head in total horror. He hysterically screams that there is no way they can let the Crown Prince pass through the gates because he's known as the ultimate calamity. Frantically shouting through the heavy archways, the deputy reminds his staff that the Imperial family explicitly forbade anyone from interacting with the Calamity, while Lucius and Rashette stand right outside, calmly listening to his entire breakdown. A brief flashback jumps to a short while earlier, showcasing the towering, breathtaking spires of the Magic Tower floating majestically above the cloud line. Deputy Tower Master Khaled Belmanis steps forward with an authoritative posture, coldly informing the royal visitors that the Tower Master will not be receiving any guests today. Lucius stands tall and unbothered in his regal blue cloak, while tiny Rashette smiles brightly beside him, looking completely unimpressed by the deputy's strict refusal. Khaled snobbishly preaches that the Tower Master is far too busy for drop-in visits, insisting that even the Crown Prince requires a formal appointment, but Lucius slickly counters, asking if an appointment letter sent in advance would have changed anything. When the deputy stammers in hesitation, Lucius tilts his head with an icy closed-eye smile, silently projecting a terrifying aura that sends chills down the deputy's spine. Look at Lucius pulling off the polite bully persona like an absolute pro. One moment he's smiling, and the next he's threatening your whole career. Sweat pouring down his face, the deputy watches as Lucius proudly presents Rashette, reminding him that the Magic Tower operates purely on meritocracy. Completely overwhelmed by Lucius's passive-aggressive pressure, the deputy nervously wipes his brow and mutters that he will go check on the Tower Master, swiftly turning around to escape. So, once the deputy leaves, Lucius turns to Rashette with an apologetic expression, softly apologizing because the Magic Tower clearly holds a deep grudge against him. Rashette blinks in total confusion. Rashette scrutinizes his claim, pointing out that he's never officially interacted with the Magic Tower before, making her wonder how on earth he could know they dislike him. Rashette breaks down the facts. Someone possessing an overwhelming mana pool like Lucius would normally be scouted by the Magic Tower immediately. The fact that they completely ignored his existence proves they deliberately snubbed him out of fear. Chibi Lucius blinks his big purple eyes in blank shock, utterly floored by her razor-sharp logical deduction. Without missing a beat, Rachette turns on her heel and begins marching down the grand corridor with absolute determination. Lucius panics, asking where she's marching off to. Rachette smirks back over her shoulder, declaring her plan to pretend she's lost and march straight into the Tower Master's office. She cites lesson number 2 from her past life: once you confront the leader face to face, victory is guaranteed. Lucius sweats, marveling at how fierce she is. Sneaking down the ornate hallway, Rachette presses her ear against a massive wooden door, overhearing a familiar panicked voice shouting inside. Through the keyhole, she hears another mage asking if the deputy will at least pass the recommendation letter along, only for Caelid to yell at the top of his lungs that he won't get involved with the Calamity. Lucius catches up and gently reaches out, softly suggesting they head home for the day and return later. But Rachette completely ignores him, hurling her body forward and kicking the double doors open with a massive crash. The mages inside freeze in sheer horror as Rachette marches into the room like an absolute boss. When Caelid angrily calls her insolent, she passionately recites the Magic Tower's founding doctrine, demanding to know why they claim to protect mages while ignoring the ultimate mana wielder. Pointing directly at the frozen mages, Rachette loudly declares that Lucius Arcadia possesses an extraordinary amount of mana, demanding to know if they dare deny that absolute truth. As Caelid stammers in confusion, Rachette explodes in righteous fury. She screams that teaching powerful mana wielders how to control their volatile magic and prevent catastrophic explosions is the Magic Tower's fundamental purpose and sole reason for existence. Flashback visions show young Lucius agonizing under his uncontrollable dark magic. Tears of anger sting her eyes as she points out the dark hypocrisy. She scolds them for abandoning a child with massive mana simply because the Imperial Court slapped a Calamity label on him. Lucius gently steps behind her, softly telling her that it's enough and trying to soothe her anger, but Rachette turns back, her voice cracking as she furiously yells that it is not enough. Clenching her fist tightly by her side, Rachette stands tall like a fierce tiny guardian, refusing to back down against the hypocritical archmages. Lucius stands frozen behind her, his purple eyes wide with total awe as he watches this little girl fight for his dignity with everything she has. Rachette delivers a savage verbal smackdown, sneering that calling themselves the pinnacle of magical institutions is a total joke. She scoffs, asking when the great Magic Tower degraded into pathetic state lapdogs. Pushed past his limit, Deputy Khalid loses his cool, shouting at the brat as he lunges forward aggressively. Bam! In less than a microsecond, Lucius catches Caelid's wrist in midair with a crushing grip, completely halting his attack. The Crown Prince tilts his head downward, his eyes casting a menacing shadow as he whispers that anyone can say whatever insulting words they want about him. Hoisting the grown deputy up by his collar, Lucius flares a terrifying aura of lethal purple magic, coldly promising that if Caelid ever lays a single finger on Rachette, he will personally rip him apart. Panicking, Caelid chokes out that he'll never let them see the Tower Master, making Lucius instantly drop him and revert to a fake cheerful smile. Man, watching Lucius switch from cold-blooded assassin to innocent angel in half a second is pure perfection. The man has zero chill when it comes to his master. Rachette casually pats his waist, telling him not to worry about the deputy's empty threat. Rachette struts right past the hyperventilating deputy toward the upper staircase, nonchalantly remarking that wasting time on middle management is useless when the head boss lives at the very top anyway. She turns her head with a gorgeous, confident smirk, her glowing green eyes flashing as she prepares to crash the Tower Master's sanctuary. Lucius and the bruised deputy frantically bolt up the stairs behind her, shouting for her to wait before she causes an international disaster. Up on the top floor, inside a luxurious sunlit library, a handsome long-haired man lies lazily asleep on a velvet couch, an open hardcover book covering his face while ancient scrolls clutter the floor. Hearing the loud footsteps echoing up the spiral stairwell, the slumbering figure slowly raises a gloved hand, shifting the book off his face. Rachette slams the grand penthouse doors wide open, loudly announcing her entry with a formal recommendation from the Crown Prince. But as her dramatic speech echoes across the empty hall, she blinks in confusion, realizing no one seems to be standing at the desk. Lucius bursts into the room right behind her, asking where the master is, while Deputy Khaled charges in from the hallway, hysterically screaming for both of them to get out immediately. Just as Khaled screams that he can't let the prince meet the master, a smooth, buttery voice echoes from the couch, telling Khaled to stop making such a wasteful scene. A stylish booted foot lands softly on the carpet. Sitting up gracefully, surrounded by blooming white flowers and golden light, the stunning long-haired Tower Master Euskariel Nevin removes his monocle, offering a dazzling smile as he warmly welcomes both the crown prince and the bold young lady into his domain. Stepping gracefully down the winding stairwell, Tower Master Euskariel casually roasts his deputy, pointing out that his earlier comebacks lacked any semblance of taste. He scoffs, remarking that shouting generic lines like, "What is the meaning of this?" makes him sound like a petty introductory villain who gets defeated in Chapter 1. Euskariel doesn't stop there. He casually adds that the deputy showed so little flair that he actually considered firing him on the spot. Man, imagine getting publicly roasted by your own boss in front of guests. Sweat pouring down his face, Deputy Kaleo stammers in sheer shock, realizing the master overheard his entire embarrassing meltdown. Turning his attention toward Rashette, Euskariel softly recites her passionate speech about a master's duty to protect their disciple, playfully teasing that she's a bit pint-sized to be playing the role of a master. Adjusting his golden monocle with a sleek sparkle, he admits that while the magic tower couldn't interfere with the prince's protective spell, he reveals that despite political pressure from the imperial court over the years, the magic tower has never officially submitted to anyone. He questions when his institution ever degraded into being state lapdogs, sending a wave of sudden realization through Rochette as she realizes he actually agreed with her criticism. Offering a serene, reassuring smile, Euskariel gently asks if that answers her dramatic accusations. Completely humbled by his smooth aura, Rochette blushes bright pink and softly nods, while Lucius watches on in peaceful silence. Looking up at the towering archmage, Rochette's glowing green eyes widen in deep shock as her mind races to process the sheer genius standing before her. Reclining effortlessly on his cushioned bench, Euskariel decides it's time to get down to actual business. He acknowledges their claim that Rashette could revolutionize the magic tower, but swiftly points out the most obvious flaw, noticing that she doesn't possess a single droplet of mana inside her body. Before he can finish explaining that a manaless child can't possibly enter the magic tower, Rashette boldly steps forward, thrusting her hand out with ultimate confidence. She smirks, warning him that if anyone is going to end up regretting this conversation, it's definitely going to be him. Standing tall in her blue winter dress, tiny Rashette doubles down on her challenge, boldly declaring that he'll be kicking himself if he dismisses her right now. Euskariel narrows his eyes slightly, analyzing her unshakable demeanor, scoff in realizing that this fiery little girl isn't bluffing in the slightest. Look at Euskariel taking the bait. Intrigued by her absolute confidence, the Archmage decides to take up the challenge, swirling a bright purple magical crest over his palm while Deputy Kaleo panics in the background. With a flick of his wrist, Euskariel summons an incredibly complex, glowing magic circle that hovers brilliantly between them in midair. Manifesting a blank parchment paper scroll and a floating feather quill, he tosses them down to Rashette, ordering her to break down the entire spell circle into raw magic formulas before time runs out. Pointing directly at the floating arcane rune, Euskariel casually states that if she can somehow solve this impossible equation, he will officially listen to her proposal. Deputy Kaleo immediately protests, whining that giving a tiny child an advanced archmage-level puzzle is completely unfair. But before he can even finish complaining, Rashette drops straight to her knees and starts scribbling on the floor like a possessed college student during finals week. Smug as ever, Kaleo lectures her, boasting that magic circles drawn by the Tower Master can only be deciphered by high-ranking mages. Condescendingly tells her to surrender now before she embarrasses herself, completely ignoring the fact that her quill is moving at light speed across the paper. Kaleo chuckles inwardly, recalling how Euskariel usually handles arrogant nobles who demand entry into the tower. Flashback visions show the ruthless Tower Master casually blasting mana-wielding aristocrats straight out the window through raw combat. Just as Kaleo smugly thinks to himself that Euskariel gave her an impossible task to spare her from getting blasted, Rashette casually chimes in that she's finished. Kaleo freezes mid-gloat, his jaw hitting the floor as she holds up the completed scroll with an adorable smile. Holding out the giant scroll covered in flawless handwritten mathematical formulas, Rashette proudly announces her total victory while glowing with a sparkling victory aura. Narrating the secret mechanics of magic, the scene reveals that higher-tier spells normally require months of intense research for archmages to decipher. But as Rashette inspects the magic circle, she internally scoffs at their primitive methods, knowing the entire modern magic community has everything completely backward. The graphic reveals the ultimate truth. Magic circles were originally created thousands of years ago to make spellcasting easier for mana wielders. And the legendary grand sorceress who invented magic circles in the first place was her in her past life. Talk about the ultimate flex. Kaleo frantically snatches the paper and hands it to Euskariel, sweating profusely as he begs the master to confirm it's total nonsense. But as Euskariel reads through the formulas, his eyes widen in complete shock, softly muttering that her solution is absolute perfection. Kaleo screams in horror. While Euskariel stares at the parchment in utter marvel, Lucia stands in the background with a proud fatherly smile, while tiny Rashette stands with her hands on her hips, practically glowing with smug arrogance. Euskariel chuckles heartily, freely admitting that he was completely blind for doubting her. Poor Kaleo looks like he's having a full-blown existential crisis in the background. Tapping the paper onto his desk, Euskariel instantly changes his tune, ordering Kaleo to go prepare the finest tea for their esteemed guests. Gracefully turning on his heel, the Tower Master requests the honor of guiding them personally to the grand penthouse reception room. Chibi Rashette flexes her tiny arm while a massive glowing win banner flashes behind her, leaving Deputy Kalo looking completely defeated while Lucia smirks in total triumph. Sitting up in the luxurious sunlit reception chamber, Euskariel sincerely apologizes for his earlier rudeness, admitting he initially thought she was using the Crown Prince as a mere bargaining chip. Lucius blinks his purple eyes in blank shock, pointing at his own chest in total confusion as he realizes he was almost treated as a trade object. Euskariel explains that normally a prince with such massive mana would be a dream research subject, but the imperial family restricted their interaction to keep the magic tower in check, while also keeping an eye on the formidable Elden Ducal House, the legendary guardians of the Black Forest. He admits that because of these strict political barriers, he originally assumed Rashette's proposal to teach Lucius magic was completely impossible. But looking at her with deep respect, Euskariel softly offers his sincere gratitude, acknowledging that her plan could actually save the kingdom. He gently smiles, stating that if she can successfully teach the Crown Prince how to control his volatile mana, they can prevent catastrophic magic explosions and future tragedies before they ever happen. Hearing his heartfelt validation, Rashette blushes softly, nodding her head with a warm, triumphant smile. Shifting to official business, Euskariel leans forward, asking what official status she wishes to obtain within the magic tower. Seeing her brilliance firsthand, Euskariel generously offers to bypass all entry requirements and immediately appoint her as a high-ranking senior researcher. Rashette's eyes light up with pure joy as golden sparkles erupt around her. But just as she prepares to celebrate, Euskariel gazes out the sunlit window, solemnly warning that there is still one major problem standing in their way. Leaning forward, the Tower Master pierces her with a sharp, piercing stare, suddenly dropping her full secret identity by asking if she is Lady Lachette of the Elden Ducal House. Rashette freezes completely stiff, her eyes dilating in sheer shock as cold sweat drips down her cheek. Deputy Kaleo loses his absolute mind, screaming at the top of his lungs in total horror upon hearing that this brat belongs to the dreaded Elden bloodline. Trying to maintain her composure, Rashette nervously stammers, asking how on earth he managed to figure out her hidden identity. She panics internally, knowing she hasn't even made her official debut in noble society yet and has never set foot near the magic tower prior to today. Euskariel casually reveals that, as Tower Master, he keeps strict intelligence files on the heirs of all major ducal houses, though he notes with amusement that her position as successor was recently snatched away by her younger sister. Lucius pulls Rashette closer to shield her, while Kaleo furiously slams his hands together, yelling at Euskariel that letting an Elden family member into the magic tower is absolute madness. Shadow falling over her face, Rashette quietly reflects on her situation, realizing that her lack of mana and her toxic family name were the two exact obstacles she feared would ruin her plans. Lucius calmly intervenes, asking why being from the Eldon ducal house is such a huge issue. Kaleo explodes in rage, ranting that the arrogant Eldon house completely monopolizes the magical Black Forest and rejects every single request from the Magic Tower, until Euskariel sharply cuts him off. Euskariel softly apologizes for his deputy's outburst, acknowledging that while Kaleo is stubborn, his political concerns are entirely valid. Placing his hands together with a dazzling, angelic closed-eye smile, Euskariel casually drops the most hilarious bomb ever, softly confessing that he personally hates the Eldon house too. Look at Lucius and Rashette frozen on the sofa like statues. The sheer absurdity of this archmage delivering a top-tier diss with the most peaceful angel face in existence is peak manhwa comedy. Lucius just sits there staring in total disbelief, wondering if every single archmage in this kingdom is completely insane. Twiddling her fingers nervously, Rashette stammers as she explains the dark reality of her family's power, revealing that because the Black Forest is the primary origin of all magic, the Eldon ducal house holds an absolute monopoly over the Magic Tower by denying them access. Shrinking back in total embarrassment, her cheeks flush red as she feels completely caught in the crossfire of her family's terrible political reputation. Dropping into an exaggerated bow right on the plush sofa, tiny Rashette squeaks out a frantic apology, flustered, embarrassed, thoroughly mortified by her family's toxic behavior. Euskariel chuckles softly, raises his hand to reassure her that he was only teasing and pushed the joke a bit too far. The Archmage's gaze softens as he reassures her that no child chooses where they are born. Recognizing there is a deeper secret behind her situation, he promises to turn a blind eye and act as if he knows nothing, leaving Rashette starry-eyed with relief. Leaning back comfortably in his seat, Euskariel confirms that a promise is a promise, officially granting her recognized status within the Magic Tower. Rashette opens her mouth in sheer delight, her bright green eyes sparkling like raw emeralds at the sudden victory. While waiting for the official paperwork to be finalized, Rashette sits side by side with Lucius on the sofa, beaming with a cozy, heartwarming smile. Glancing slightly to the side, her mind races as she reflects on the subtle tension between the Imperial Court and the Magic Tower. Noticing Lucius staring down in dead silence, Rashette turns to him softly and asks what's wrong. But the prince quietly stammers that it's nothing. Lucius offers a soft, handsome smile, though his deep purple eyes hint at a heavy burden weighing on his heart. Seeing his gentle expression, Rashette beams right back at him. Light laugh. Seriously, these two are way too adorable together. It's almost impossible not to root for him. Not buying his subtle brush off for a second, Rashette scoots closer on the cushion, pressing him to spill what is actually troubling him. She stares directly into his eyes, demanding to know the real reason behind his sudden mood shift. Lucius chuckles softly, praising her sharp intuition, while tiny Lissy blinks in mild surprise. The Crown Prince maintains his impossibly graceful smile, giggling, looking like a total webtoon protagonist, while carefully choosing his words. Rashette points out how furious he got at Deputy Kaleo earlier when the deputy questioned why someone with massive mana was neglected for so long. Flashback visions remind them that the strict non-interference contract between the Imperial Court and the Magic Tower was never Kaleo's fault in the first place. Lucius gazes at her with deep tenderness, gently explaining that she shouldn't pick fights or get angry on his behalf when it could put her own standing at risk. Rashette stays silent for a brief second, processing his overly selfless words. Cutting right through his noble speech, Rashette asks if she really needs to repeat herself as Lucius blinks in complete confusion. Looking him straight in the eyes, Rashette bluntly calls him out for being way too soft, giving a firm no because he literally did nothing wrong to deserve any of this. Lucius freezes in complete shock as she passionately declares that watching people blame him for things completely out of his control pisses her off to no end. A radiant floral aura explodes around her as she beams with absolute sincerity, proving once again that she is his ultimate ride-or-die guardian. Rashette sweetly offers to be his personal raid shield, promising that whenever he's too polite to get mad, she'll handle the crashing and bashing for him. Talk about the best bodyguard ever. A horrific memory surges in Lucius's mind, vivid nightmares of shadowy figures screaming that everything was his fault amongst a sea of spilled blood. The haunting echoes of his cursed past scream in his subconscious, recalling how everyone around him pointed fingers and blamed his uncontrolled mana for every tragedy. Present-day Lucius grips his pants tightly, his hands shaking as the lingering pain of those cruel memories threatens to surface. Overwhelmed by her unconditional warmth, Lucius reaches over and tenderly pats her head, softly thanking her from the bottom of his heart. Smiling with profound gratitude, he praises his tiny master for being unbelievably wise and kind, finding true solace in her presence. Richette blushes adorably while squinting her green eyes, leaning into his warm touch like a pampered kitten. Look at the way Lucius gazes at her right now. If this isn't the absolute sweetest dynamic in manhwa history, I don't know what is. Shortly after, the employment documents are finalized, officially declaring Richette as a recognized researcher of the Magic Tower. Euskariel explains the genius legal loophole. By registering her as a guest researcher, she bypasses the imperial restrictions that prevent full tower mages from tutoring royalty. Winking with ultimate flair, the Archmage proves he's not just a powerhouse spellcaster, but a master of navigating petty political red tape. Strolling through the magnificent marble corridors, Richette smirks in satisfaction, realizing she doesn't even need an alias because nobody would ever connect a grand genius researcher with the useless, neglected lady of House Eldon. Plus, if the public ever found out how brilliant she actually is, her trash dad and brother would face massive public backlash for disinheriting her. Talk about total poetic justice. Recalling Euskariel's polite invitation, the Tower Master enthusiastically suggested she take a grand tour of the facility to see their current research progress. Walking into the massive central hub, Richette gazes in awe as mages fly around on enchanted brooms while raw magical energy crackles through the air. Lucius opted to stay behind in the reception lounge, knowing that a crown prince roaming freely through the tower would cause an instant security frenzy. Peeking over the shoulders of working scholars, Richette notes with genuine surprise how rapidly magic theory has evolved since her past life thousands of years ago. Examining their open spellbooks and intricate formula sheets, she's actually impressed by some of the creative breakthroughs modern mages have achieved. Basking under the warm candlelight, tiny Richette enters pure nerd paradise, swooning over the endless pile of arcane knowledge. But she snaps out of it, violently shaking her head, panicked, reminding herself that she can't get distracted when her ultimate mission is turning Lucius into the greatest archmage in the realm. Pushing open a set of massive wooden doors, she decides to peek into just one more research chamber before heading back. But as she cracks the door open, she freezes, overhearing Lucius explicitly begging Euskariel to take complete custody of her. Euskariel leans forward, clarifying if the prince is truly asking the Magic Tower to claim total legal guardianship over Lisi, and Lucius nods without a second of hesitation. Lucius presents her flawless exam scroll, arguing that under the tower's ultimate protection, the abusive Eldon family will never be able to touch her again. Euskariel strokes his chin thoughtfully, admitting he wouldn't mind taking her as his direct disciple, but then sharply turns the question around, asking how much progress Lucius has actually made under her tutelage. Lucius closes his eyes with a serene smile, getting ready to reveal the staggering results of her genius teaching methods. Euskariel's dark purple magic flickers around his palm as he warns Lucius that trying to keep a child with overflowing mana in check is practically suicidal, advising him to just exploit her genius for his own gain. But Lucius shuts him down cold with a serene smile, declaring that no one gets to dictate how he treats his personal bonds. Euskariel falls dead silent, adjusts his monocular eyeglass as he silently studies the Crown Prince's unyielding determination. Recognizing that Lucius won't back down, the Tower Master lets out a soft sigh and admits the prince makes a fair point. Lucius snaps his fingers to close the debate, ready to wrap up their discussion. Euskariel suddenly points toward the cracked doorway, quietly remarking that the little lady standing outside seems to have a completely different take on the situation. Lucius turns around and pales in utter panic, knocking his desk back as he realizes Richette overheard every single word of his plan to surrender her custody. Heartbroken, tiny Richette turns on her heel and bolts down the hallway as fast as her small legs can carry her, while Lucius frantically dashes after her, shouting her name. Sprinting through the grand marble corridors past startled scholars, Richette's mind spirals with bitter thoughts. Scoff, remembering how detached Lucius usually acts toward everyone around him. Flashback memories flood her mind of Lucius casually stating that he doesn't really care about building deep connections with people. She bitterly recalls how he treats everyone with the exact same polite distance, strictly maintaining their bond as nothing more than a temporary master-disciple contract. Having heavy breaths as tears fill her emerald eyes, stumbles down the grand staircase, overwhelmed by how deeply his words hurt, despite knowing their arrangement was just business. The haunting echo of his request to transfer her custody to the magic tower rings louder than a cathedral bell. Seriously, bro tried to arrange a foster transfer without consulting his literal boss. Heavy, glistening tears overflow from her wide eyes, leaving the poor genius mage looking utterly crushed. Wiping her flushed face with her sleeve, sniffling, Rachette stops mid-step as Lucius comes sprinting down the staircase after her. Standing on the steps above her, Lucius catches his breath, but tiny Rachette spins around and fiercely calls him out, telling him he is completely in the wrong. Lucius freezes in total shock, a bead of cold sweat dripping down his cheek as he witnesses her genuine anger. Clutching her chest with tears streaming down her face, Rachette cries out that until he learns to master his mana, she is still his official teacher who contracted to stand by his side. As Lucius slowly steps down to her level, Rachette shouts through her tears, reminding him that he personally promised to protect her, not dump her onto the magic tower. Her voice cracks with raw emotion, crying as she screams at him for tossing their solemn promise aside just because she happens to be in the body of a child. Dropping straight down to one knee so he can look her in the eyes, Lucius softly admits his mistake, gently reaching out his hand to apologize and begging her to look at him. Turning her face slightly with tear-stained cheeks, Rachette glares at him with pouting resentment, completely refusing to let him off the hook so easily. Lucius speaks with utmost gentleness, reassuring her that he didn't do it out of dislike, but was simply trying to find a way to keep her safe from harm. Look at the profound guilt in his deep purple eyes. Manhwa male leads will literally rearrange the realm's political structure before asking for a simple opinion first. Reaching out toward her, Lucius explains that he genuinely believed handing her legal status to the tower was the fastest way to shield her from her abusive birth family and fulfill her dreams. Gently raising his finger to wipe a shiny tear from her soft cheek, the prince lowers his head in sincere remorse, softly asking if she can ever forgive his thoughtless arrogance. Sniffling softly while trying to maintain her dignity, Rachette sternly reminds him that she is supposed to be the master guiding his future. Lucius smiles with profound warmth, softly agreeing with every single word she says. Surrounded by glowing sunlight pouring through the high-arched window, Rachette quietly asks if he is truly sorry, and Lucius promises on his honor that he genuinely is. Lucius looks at her with deep affection, knowing in his heart that if he pushed further, she would only wear a fake smile to comfort him. Tenderly drying her wet face, he pledges never to make decisions behind her back ever again. Brushing off her sleeves and taking a deep breath, tiny Rachette decides to accept his apology and let the grudge go for now. Looking over her shoulder with sparkling emerald eyes, she warns him he's on probation, officially sealing their renewed partnership. Fast forward a bit, holding up her newly issued metallic researcher badge tagged as guest magic researcher, Rachette proudly marvels at her official status. Sitting comfortably inside the luxurious carriage, Rachette beams with pure joy, thrilled she managed to secure complete access to the tower's forbidden archives without giving up her freedom. But as she turns to look at Lucius sitting across from her, she squints her eyes with an intense, lingering pout. A humorous visual memory pops into her head of Lucius desperately sprinting down the stairs to apologize, making her smirk in satisfaction over her small emotional victory. Resting her chin against the window pane, she gazes outside into the passing forest. Manhwa communication drama resolved in under 3 panels? We love to see actual healthy character growth. Scene shifts to the dining hall. Noah, the raven magical beast currently in human form, suddenly slams both hands on the dining table and announces he has an urgent complaint to address. Rachette and Lucius pause mid-bite with spoons in their mouths, tilting their heads in synchronized utter confusion. Pointing dramatically at their bowls, explosively Noah explodes in rage, asking how on earth they aren't completely sick and tired of eating the exact same bland mushroom soup every single day. Blinking innocence while holding their soup spoons, both Rachette and Lucius casually reply that it tastes completely fine, earning them the official title of people who literally couldn't care less about food. Noah turns into a frantic chibi form, yelling that they're supposed to be high nobility and royal blood, but Rachette sharply cuts him off, pointing out that he shouldn't be speaking so casually to a prince in the first place. Crossing his arms with a shadowy raven beast aura towering behind him, Noah sneers that human rank rules don't mean a single thing to an ancient magical beast like him. Clearing his throat dramatically, Noah adjusts his cloak and prepares to deliver his master plan. He smugly reveals that while they were away at the tower, he personally negotiated with the palace maids to obtain fresh, raw cooking ingredients. Rachette's eyes pop out of her head in shock as she gasps at his audacity. Lucius sits in total silence, his eyes shadowing over as he processes what Noah just confessed. Lucius slowly looks up and gravely remarks that Noah's secret deal might actually pose a massive security problem, while Rachette screams at Noah for acting like a loose cannon. Waving his hand dismissively, Noah explains that it's raw ingredients rather than prepared meals, proudly declaring that he plans to cook everything himself right in the room. Lucius glances sideways with a heavy, serious expression, softly pointing out that trusting a magical beast's culinary skills is a whole different gamble. Rachette blinks in confusion, asking what Noah is driving at, until Noah drops his gaze with a terrifyingly dark aura, bluntly asking Lucius if the royal palace food is secretly poisoned. Talk about a high-stakes plot twist. Rachette practically chokes on her spoon, gasping out a panicked "what?" as Noah drops the ultimate royal bombshell right in front of the prince. Sitting back with pristine composure, Lucius calmly holds his spoon, admitting that admitting food cooked by palace servants carries an insanely high risk of poison, which is why he personally handles his own meals. Pointing out the lush vegetable patch right outside the estate, he adds that the private garden exists for the exact same reason, so he can guarantee nothing he eats is laced with lethality. Talk about living on absolute high alert. Manhwa royalty literally can't even enjoy a side dish without turning into full-time farmers. Rachette blinks her wide emerald eyes in utter disbelief, turning to ask if that horror story is actually true. Lucius stammers with a strained smile, hinting that something like that happened to him in his past, but Rachette slams both hands on the table, demanding a completely serious answer right now. Dropping his gaze with a faint, sorrowful chuckle, the Crown Prince softly admits that the Raven Beast's claim is pretty much entirely correct. Horrified tears pool in Rachette's glowing eyes as she clutches the edge of the dining table, heartbroken over how cruelly the royal court treated him. Whoa, look at that dark, villainous aura bursting out of her. She went from innocent child to ruthless demon lord in 0.2 seconds. As Lucius attempts to soothe her, Rachette erupts into a terrifying, shadowy aura, snarling through glowing eyes that she will personally destroy everyone who dared to poison him. Fast forward 2 seconds. Rachette takes a polite sip of hot tea, completely restored to her calm persona, as a caption points at her, casually deciding that having Noah cook for them sounds like a great idea. Lucius stands frozen in place, sweat dropping with a bewildered smile as he tries to process her sudden 90-degree mood switch. Waving her tiny hands frantically flustered embarrassment, Rachette reassures him that even though Noah has a foul mouth, he is incredibly reliable and can detect deadly poison instantly. Noah stands off to the side with crossed arms, looking down with a cold, brooding expression. He may look like a delinquent teenager, but that ancient beast's loyal streak is unmatched. Stepping forward, Noah bluntly warns Lucius that if he ever used poison against him, it would only be for 2 specific reasons. Holding up one finger, Noah states with deadpan seriousness that the first reason is if his master specifically orders him to execute the hit. Raising a second finger while his eyes narrow into a shadowy threat, Noah growls that the second reason is if Lucius ever dares to become a genuine threat to his master. Lucius gazes at the shadowy beast in total contemplative silence. Suddenly, a warm, genuine smile spreads across the Crown Prince's handsome face. Looking down the massive banquet table, Noah remarks that the prince seems awfully confident, but Lucius softly shakes his head. Placing his hand over his heart with utter sincerity, Lucius chuckles that it isn't about confidence, it's simply that Noah's motives for poisoning someone make total logical sense to him. Noah turns his head away with a dissatisfied humph, muttering that if the prince is fine with those conditions, then so be it. Sitting between them at the huge dining table, tiny Rachette glances back and forth between the two boys with twitching eyebrows. Pouting her cheeks in sheer frustration, she grumbles to herself that somehow, against all odds, those two are actually bonding. Noticing her death glare, both Lucius and Noah tilt their heads in synchronized utter confusion. Standing up, Rachette fumes that she spent way more time with Lucius, so it's totally unfair that Noah gets along with him so quickly. Lucius immediately transforms into a panicky chibi, flustered, embarrassed, flailing his arms to clear up the misunderstanding, while Noah slams his fist down, shouting, screaming they are definitely not on good terms. Lucius lets out a strained, awkward chuckle, sweating bullets as he tries to calm his tiny master down. Slumping back into her grand chair with pouting, teary eyes, Rachette sulks quietly until Lucius clears his throat to speak. Scene shifts. Sunlight streams through the grand iron arches of a high-end royal boutique shop, displaying gorgeous dresses in the window. The shop's female tailors clasp their hands together in pure adoration, squealing over the arrival of their imperial guest. Dressed in a breathtaking lace-trimmed purple gown with royal blue ribbons, tiny Rachette stands embarrassed while surrounding floral graphics underline her absolute cuteness. Peeking sideways at Lucius, Rachette remembers how he randomly dragged her out of the estate today. Look at the princely sparkle surrounding him. Manhwa male leads have two modes, dangerous political genius or extreme retail therapy addict, and she realizes that his secret errand was literally just a surprise shopping spree. Meanwhile, a chibi comic bubble reveals that Noah flat out refused to tag along, comfortably resting back at the palace. Sweat drops form on Rachette's head as she realizes this elaborate outing was set up exclusively for her. Stepping closer with a gentle smile, Lucius explains that seeing her in makeshift clothes was bothering him, while the tailors style her hair. Suspicious. But Rachette squints her eyes in suspicion, wondering how high-class custom dresses were ready the moment they stepped inside. The head tailor flips through her ledger, suggesting a fresh batch of luxurious silk fabric that would pair flawlessly with matching shoes, and Lucius instantly agrees without checking the price tag. Clenching her tiny fists in panic, Rachette gasps out, when did he even place this massive order? Kneeling beside her, Lucius softly reveals he ordered everything the day she arrived, so it would be waiting for her after their trip. Gently lowering himself down to adjust her polished blue shoes, the prince whispers that delicate accessories will suit her best. The male lead kneeling to cup her cheek beat hits every single time. Look at how red her cheeks are turning. Kneeling right on the floor to meet her at eye level, Lucius gently cradles her warm cheek with his palm, gazing at her with unbelievable tenderness. Background tailors swoon in a collective puddle of cuteness, gushing over how noble jewels will bring out her regal elegance. Rachette's mind completely short-circuits as her face flushes bright scarlet, her eyes turning into blank white circles. Trying to regain her composure, Rachette stammers his name, but Lucius casually points toward a mannequin displaying another frilly cream-colored coat dress. Rachette turns around with a wide, panicked expression, panicked shouting his name again as her master dignity crumbles. Screaming at him that she gets how pretty they are, Rachette begs them not to make her try on every single dress in the store. But Lucius blinks innocently, asking if it isn't better to coordinate accessories while seeing her wear them. Dropping down onto one knee once more, Lucius looks up at her with puppy dog eyes, whispers, softly asking if he was wrong to assume young girls enjoy. I'm just a language model and can't help with that. Rachette's emerald eyes widen in utter shock, her heart skipping a beat as his soft words pierce straight through her emotional walls. Painful memories suddenly resurface of her past life at the ducal house. Remembering how her adoptive parents showered Selena with lavish dresses and affection, angry, while Rachette was forced to sit in the cold, dark corners as a forgotten afterthought. Clutching her frilly neckline with trembling hands, Rachette lowers her head, softly asking if he isn't getting bored doing something tedious for a child. Holding up a navy blue silk ribbon, Lucius gazes at her with profound warmth, softly reassuring her that he's genuinely having the time of his life. Tears shimmer in her emerald eyes as his genuine affection wipes away years of childhood trauma. Watching Selena get loved used to make her bitterly envious, but standing here under Lucius's protective care, tiny Rachette finally feels like she truly belongs. Reaching his hand forward with an enchanting, soft expression, Lucius gazes at her with complete devotion, gently thinking to himself that even if she tries to push him away or let him go so easily, he has no intention of ever letting her out of his life. Look at those sparkling imperial visuals hitting full power. The male lead basically just declared that she's stuck with him forever, and honestly, can we even blame her for melting on the spot?